I think we'll go ahead and get started. We'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Orem City Planning Commission. We've asked Ms. Buxton to offer an opening prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we are thankful to be met together this evening for the Planning Commission of Orem. We're very thankful for this wonderful city that we live in. We're thankful for its beauty and its goodness, and we are thankful that we can help in a volunteer way to take care of it. We ask that the Spirit will be here with us as we hear things and decide things, that we will be able to have open minds and be able to listen to the information, to make good decisions and to be wise. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. We remind everyone that this meeting is being broadcast on YouTube.
Wait to have Lori click over the program here. Item 3.1 is a request from the applicant, Mr. Derek Wetton, to approve the site plan for a affordable senior housing project. If you're aware, in the city we have a few different overlay zones. One of those is the newest one is the ASH, stand for Affordable Senior Housing, and that parallels State Street on each side, a couple thousand feet on each side of State Street, and provide an opportunity to provide some income restricted, age restricted housing. And this would be at 430 West, 600 North in the R75 ASH zoning, and the ASH is just an overlay. Property can develop as the standard underlying zone dictates. You can see the identification map here where the property is located and the accompanying aerial photo to the right. Of course, the property in question would be that property you see on the right in the blue. Currently is a vacant piece of property. Just to the right of that on the corner is a affordable senior housing project that is currently under construction, probably close to being finished at this time, if not already. That was done by Mr. Ty Reiser. So basically, in the ASH zone, you can do up to 4 units. They would all remain under common single ownership. They would not be able to be parceled off or condominium off into individual ownership. You're limited now to 500 square feet to 900 square feet, 2-bedroom maximum, and then your setbacks in the front and the back are 20 feet. Your side setbacks are 10 feet. The code also requires 1.5 parking stalls per unit. One of those stalls must also then be covered. So the applicant has the proposed site plan you see here on the left, and very similar to the right would be then the landscape plan. Also, one thing also required by the ordinance is that to not look like a multifamily building, the entrances to each unit have to be on separate elevations. So that's what the applicant has come up with here in this design, to provide those on separate elevations. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, but the doors themselves actually do face a different direction. You can see then the parking is out front. On the left side of that parking area would be the carport, would be the covered requirement, providing those 4 stalls, 1 covered for each unit. And again, landscaping then on the right. And the proposed elevations you see here.
Are there any questions for Mr. Stroud? So the parking is in front.
Parking is in front.
Street.
In the ordinance in 22-7, under the purpose of the affordable senior housing zone, we've looked at this with the parking in the front, and as staff, we've collectively come to the understanding that we don't feel this request meets what would be listed as number 3. That'd be requiring standards that enable affordable senior housing to fit into the surrounding neighborhood. Basically just for the fact that basically your whole front yard is a parking lot. You generally don't see that in a single family residential zone. You've got landscaping, maybe you have a 20-foot wide driveway, maybe a third portion of a driveway, but in itself, most of it would be landscaping. The city code requires that 70% of that front yard be landscaped outside of where the driveway is. And so, coupled with the fact that the carport structure, the additional parking off to the right, most of what you see then from the street would be the parking structure, the canopy structure, and the rest of the parking. Again, we just don't feel that makes it fit into the surrounding as it still appears as a single family. You know, just like the requirement where the entrances have to be on separate elevations. So you don't have four doors all facing the street, for example. You drive by, you still have it still looks to be somewhat like a single family dwelling.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is the applicant present? Would you like to make any comments?
I would, thank you.
You gonna plug into that?
Yeah, if you could state your name.
My name is Derek.
Should be up.
My name is Derek Wetton. Appreciate your time. Fun to be back. Hope this year they give you guys the biggest parade float in the whole parade, but you keep asking if they don't. I've got a presentation here. It was working before the meeting, but what if you disconnect?
You have HD. No, this is an Apple. You have HD.
Well, I'm just wondering if you disconnect yours, if that'll.
Yeah.
So did you just disconnect Dave?
There we go. All right, good. Anticipation builds. Appreciate the opportunity. Dave already introduced my project. I don't know if there's any questions. Glad to do that. There's the interior floor plan, a unit floor plan. Glad to answer any questions. Just a little bit more information on the appearance, the exterior appearance of our project. We are right next to the Ty Riser project, I call it. I'm sure there's a real name, but Ty gets the credit, so we'll name it after him. Our thought is to use a very similar brick, soffit, fascia, roof, asphalt shingles, everything, the carport structure to be very similar to his. You'll see ours, we have some stucco going around the sides. I don't have as deep of pockets as Ty does, but do think our thought is to be very similar to his. We're not stuck on that, but thought it would be a good idea. This shows, we do have, if you can see there on the closest corner of the top image, a front porch area. There's two doors that come out onto this porch. It's approximately 25 feet long, 5 feet wide, so there's plenty of room, but thought that would help give it a little bit of a residential feel rather than four doors lined up or whatever. So some front elevations. A lot, I think, of what we're talking about today is a parking situation and whether it meets the standard that it fit into the existing neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhood. First, I'd like to talk about the first number one in this purpose, allowing densities higher than typical residential developments. So that is a stated purpose for this development, this zoning code for the ASH. With that, as mentioned, comes a parking requirement. Automatically, from the beginning, we know in an ASH development, there's going to be more parking than is going to be in a typical single-family home. That's just part of the code. We know that's there. I've looked at the other developments that have been approved in the city. I think the first was this on 443 East, 400 South. It's been built for a few years now. I don't know how many. A long, skinny lot, deep lot. They put the structure at the back and the parking there along the street frontage. And really, as I've figured, it's the only way they can make this work to get the parking and still meet landscaping requirements, everything else. The second was over on North Main Street, right next to the Catholic Church. they were quite clever. They had two adjacent vacant lots and built two fourplexes next to each other, and were clever in having their drive access be a shared, and then it goes to each side. Really a pretty good idea, a good plan, and they've got garages and then also parking stalls up to the garage. These are pretty close to square lots. It's important to note that either one of these buildings could not be built on their own. The only way this works on a square lot, well, it doesn't. They could not have rear parking on a square lot. There's a 24-foot required driveway to get to the back of the lot, and then sufficient backing in and out. I cannot find a way that this would work on a single lot, on a square lot, to have parking in the rear. The third project was recently completed, approved last summer, and just finished construction and occupancy, is the adjacent property to my proposal. Put the 4 units out on the corner. This is on a corner lot. He put the 4 units on the corner, but then again, the parking structure it's on significant street frontage. It's there, and from one view, it's behind the property. From the other view, it's right next to the structure. So all 3 different shaped lots, long and skinny, square, flat and wide. The only way that it seems we can have the parking that is required and is appropriate, the appropriate parking, the only way to have it is with significant street frontage. I haven't been able to find a way to combat that, regardless of the size of the lot. Well, the size of the lot matters, but the shape of the lot, typical quarter-acre lots, it just doesn't work without having parking close to the street. I feel like there's an important matter of precedence. The 2 projects, 400 South and 400 West, were both approved under the same code requirements that my project is being judged against, and it's unfair to hold my development to a different standard. As you know, the staff led and the city council approved changes to the Ash zoning code, and the parking was not addressed in those changes. It's my feeling if staff wanted to, if they didn't like what they had previously approved, then that should have been addressed in the zoning code changes. So that's talking about the densities and the parking, and there's really no way to do the parking that I have found without putting it towards the street. Now focus on the third standard, having it fit in the surrounding neighborhood. I've looked at this neighborhood. I bite my lip a little bit when I say that it fits the neighborhood, because as you'll see, there is a very eclectic mix of homes and parking situations in this neighborhood. I don't know if anything fits this neighborhood because it's so eclectic. I strongly am convinced that it cannot be said that it does not fit this neighborhood because of the eclectic. The top left is a picture of the home immediately to the west. It has an attached single carport, and then next to that, you can see it a little bit, is one of those curved metal roof carports detached. The home immediately to the east is this 4-plex, and it has the carport there with 4 stalls. Across the street, just looking straight across the street, the home on the left has a single-car garage at the rear of the property, but it looks like they're parking out uncovered there along the street or closer to the street in the front setback of the property. And on the right is a brand new home, just a couple of years old, traditional 2-story or traditional 2-car attached garage. Looking a little bit further into the surrounding neighborhood, on the top right again is that home immediately west. The top left home is the next home. That's a duplex with 2 attached single garages, so a duplex there. And then the next home to the west is another duplex, this with carports that are attached. The top left, or the top right, excuse me, in this image is the next home, so the fourth to the west of my project, a single family attached two-car garage. Across the street from that is a home with a single attached carport. And then next to that is obviously a big church parking lot. Going the other direction to the east and headed north a little bit. Again, directly to the east is the new fourplex. On the north side of that is an attached two-car garage home. Next to that, on the north side of that, is a single-family home, and it actually has one. On the left side, you can see there a detached one-car garage with a carport. On the right side, I think they've got another in the back of the home, another detached garage. Further north of that is this little, I think it's fourplexes, or excuse me, not fourplex, I think it's townhomes with covered parking across the street. So now we're still on 400 West, 650 North. There's 3 fourplexes. They all have street, this parking that's right here on the front edge of the street, front and side setbacks, no covered parking, just kind of a free-for-all mess. There's 3 of those, and then the top right, the next home is a single carport. The next home after that is a double carport attached. Coming south and then working our way back, a home, the bottom left image is a home with a detached garage in the back. Then the next home has, the bottom right is just a detached metal canopy carport. The home on the corner of 400 West, 600 North has an attached one-car carport. And then we've talked a little bit about the homes directly across the street, the rear garage, the new home with the two-car attached garage. On the corner of 450 West, 600 North, a nice two-car attached garage. The next 2 homes to that, again, are the two-car garage attached, and then the church parking lot. So in this surrounding neighborhood, there's a very eclectic mix between a few two-car garages, carports, attached, detached, 1 or 2, open parking on the fourplexes, rear garages. Our proposal fits in this surrounding neighborhood as much as any other type of parking arrangement, garage or otherwise, would fit, in my opinion. There's just such a variety that I think it's hard to argue that it doesn't fit because it's so eclectic already. So kind of in summary, the 2 different points, the code requires parking appropriately on different size lots. The only way I've been able to find to accommodate the required parking is in the front along the street frontage. And then I think ours fits in the surrounding neighborhood as well as can. Again, a reminder of the precedents. I don't see how I can be denied when these other projects were approved under the exact same code requirements. Any questions for me?
Derek, how much landscape is in the front there? Is 70 or 75% that is the required
70 outside the driveway.
outside driveway? Okay. So for your project, how much of that is landscape?
I don't remember. I'll let staff, they might know better than I want to say the total landscaping requirement is 40 to 50% for the entire project. As far as what's up front, I just don't know. We do have as much of that front setback, that front 20 feet landscaped. Staff's required us to have a 24-foot driveway there. I'd love to shrink that down to maybe a 12 or even an 18. So we can have more landscaping before we have the parking, but based on staff requirements, we've got a 24-foot driveway, and then the rest of that front area is landscaped. And percentage-wise, I don't know.
Correction on the, I was thinking that 70's commercial, residential is a little different. Steve's got that.
Okay.
So, boy, that's loud. The provision that we're talking about as far as the required landscaping in the front yard is Orem City Code 2214-13, subsection B, which refers to residential lots. And that section says the entire front yard and side yard adjacent to a street, excluding driveways and sidewalks, of developed lots in residential zones shall be landscaped. So that's saying the whole front yard except for driveways in a residential lot is supposed to be landscaped. The area of driveways on residential lots shall not exceed 60% of the area of the front yard or the side yard in which the driveway is located. So, in other words, a driveway could potentially take up to 60% of the front yard, which means that at least the 40% obviously would have to be landscaped. And it does allow for a driveway in the front yard, but it doesn't allow for parking per se. Now, obviously, in a lot of single-family homes, people use their driveways to park also, but that's still a driveway. One thing I wanted to make a comment on is this provision, to my recollection, was recently amended. That provision that the driveway couldn't take up more than 60%, I think was added in 2008. And the reason for that is that we were starting to see a lot of people constructing driveways that essentially took up almost their entire front yard, so that there was no landscaping there. And so we made this modification in order to address that problem, so that there was at least 40% of the front yard that would be landscaped, even if up to 60% were used as a driveway. So I appreciate what Mr. Wetton is saying. He showed a lot of pictures of homes that had pretty large driveway areas. I don't know how many of those exceeded 60%, but to the extent that they did exceed 60%, those homes and other situations like them were the reason why the city made this ordinance amendment. One other comment I just want to make, and I understand his concern and frustration possibly about other affordable senior housing projects. I think there was one or maybe two that got approved with parking in the front. And quite honestly, I think city staff just missed this provision and didn't enforce it because we didn't remember that it was there, or for whatever reason, it was just a mistake on the part of staff. And it wasn't the intent to set a precedent. I certainly understand his frustration that they got approved, and now that the staff has caught this, they're saying that he can't do that as well. But I guess the idea is that if you made a mistake in the past, it's not a good reason to continue making it. So I hope that helps.
What is the lot width? Do we know?
Approximately 75 feet.
I think it's 75.
I think you'd be hard-pressed, I would believe, to build a single-family home on 75 feet of width, wouldn't you, with the setbacks? Wouldn't you be required to use up 20 feet between the two sides?
Well, that gives you 55. There's plenty.
55, but I mean, you're not going to build like the little house that's right to the side right there, I wouldn't think. I think that'd be too big for it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you could build a single-family home on here with the parking, the driveway and the garage. That would work. And we've explored lots of different ways to put the parking in the back, and a 24-foot driveway going all the way to the back, and that doesn't give us any room to build in back. It doesn't give us enough room to have the 6 stalls with the backing space, and coming out, even looked at a big loop to go back on one side and park and then come out on the other side, and that doesn't give us any landscaping or enough landscaping for the property. We've talked about a garage instead of this structured parking area, to do it as a garage, and have the garage there on what is on the top side here where we have covered parking, just have that be an attached garage attached to the house. So we've looked at lots of different options, and we're willing to do the garage. And I don't know if the garage if we had a garage coming up to the 20-foot front setback, if that That means our front yard is just the first 20 feet, and I think we probably meet that 60% landscaping, or we're close to it at least, so.
To me, that was the biggest difference between all the things you were showing that were comparable in the area, was that they were driveways and garages, not carports, which almost constitutes parking lot, in the look of it.
Sure.
And just to address that last question, I think if you did have an attached garage, then you could pull that out to the front setback line and be okay. Maybe Dave wants to chime in on that, but that would be my understanding.
Yeah, no, Derek had drawn up a plan that showed a garage, and that didn't pass the muster of all staff that looked at it as well.
Because,
Honestly, I don't remember what the exact reason was. They just looked at it and said, I don't think that meets it. And just to clarify I was the planner on the first project that came through. When I processed that application, the requirement is 1.5 stalls, 1 covered parking. I processed it and said, okay, that means you have to have parking somewhere. So we went through, put it in the front yard, nobody batted an eye to it. Only after it was built and people actually got to physically look at it, from a, real perspective, that's when we started to question it.
so we're talking about 400 South?
Yeah. And then when Derek came along, he had the same thing, because obviously the parking in front's the easiest option. And so that's where I really got the most discussion then.
And as I said in my presentation, my feeling is if there's a realization that staff didn't want parking in the front, then that should have and could have easily been included in the code changes last year. And appropriately, it should have. If that's intended to fit as part of this, make it easy and obvious, and I think it should have been included there if that was what was wanted or intended.
Is that back setback as small as it can be?
20.
It's really close if it's 20-foot back setback, and we're less than 25 feet, I know. So we're very close.
Are there any other questions?
Just one. On Ty's building that he has right next to that, his parking is on the east or the west side, is
Yes.
that correct?
That'd be close to our parking, yes. A lot of landscaping in between, but yeah.
You talked about the two that were up by the Catholic Church on 400 East.
500 north,
Yeah, I know that piece. I drive by it a lot, so.
yeah.
Have you spoken with Ty about any kind of accommodation while he's still in his building phase?
We had talked about that early on, and he was ready to build a lot sooner than we were, and went ahead. I've looked at, let me get back there. I don't remember the exact.
Yeah.
That we talked about it, and we could change our building configuration that, that potentially could work. It's been a while, though I don't remember the details on that.
And Dave, I don't know if that would accommodate if there could be something happen. I know Ty's is built.
Yeah, I think like Derek said, if they were closer at this stage of both doing something together, yeah, maybe some could have had a common driveway come through that could have served both of them. For instance, goes back to his parking. Yeah, obviously that could have worked. I think the cards are right.
Well, it still could. I mean, things that are built can be unbuilt.
Well, and you got to look at the fact.
Seen it happen.
That ties, though, he's on a corner lot. His isn't as shallow.
Right.
Shows the
I'm just wondering if the possibility.
I'm not sure,
say that's probably it.
but I'm guessing that's Ty's property line right there. So it looks like there's room enough maybe to get the 7 stalls. I talked with Ty. He seems like a nice guy, but
No, he's not. No.
I always cringe at the thought that my project would be determined on somebody else's, at his whim, whether or not he wants to do it. And so that would be I'm open to it, but hesitant to be tied to that or limited to that. unless Ty wants to stand up right now and say that he'd love to do it, and then we could discuss it further, I suppose.
Well, have him stand up and let's do it. Okay. That's all I have, just.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll just make a couple comments. I did the same thing you did. I took all the pictures. When I came to the meeting, I'm looking around the surrounding areas, and I'm like, is this going to really impact it negatively? Or, and if something was set precedence in the past, what does precedence mean then? I looked at I looked at the church parking lot because it's right there. There's a lot of visibility of parking lot. I don't know. This is where I'm a little perplexed. If it just doesn't conform at all, we have to deny, and that's it? Or is it vague? Are we conforming or are we not conforming here?
Well, again, you go back to that section 22-14-13B, the landscaping requirement, where
Right.
it has to all be landscaped, the front yard, except for driveway, and the driveway can't be more than 60% of the lot. That's pretty black and white. I don't know that, I'm not sure what the percentage of the landscaping is on Mr. Wetton's project. I don't know, maybe he can tell us that. But
I'm just looking up here on the code. This is a code for the ash fourplex specific to the code, and my memory is that there's a minimum landscaping percentage. I'm not finding it off the top of my head.
It'd be under the landscaping, if anywhere, go to the landscape section.
Right here.
Covered by buildings, there's no percentage, it says,
Yeah.
covered by buildings or driveway. Parking area shall be landscaped.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wanted to check that. In my mind, we're 40 to 50%, but that's an old memory. I'm sorry, I don't know a better number.
I just want to make a comment to Derek.
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
And you've been in this seat.
Pardon?
You've been in this seat.
Yes, I have. I know
So
the fun of it.
especially those of us that know you, we're really torn because we kind of want to give you what you want because we like you. And we think you're
I hope you'll give me what I want because it fits the code and the precedence that's already been set.
Well, we're
But-
kind of hearing two different things on that. So, and I loved your presentation. It was very Derek with its thoroughness. It was amazing. I loved it. But you've been in this seat. You also know how we rely and trust staff.
Sure.
Rely on and trust staff. So just so you know, we're up here, at least I think some of us are conflicted. We want to do the right thing by the neighborhood, and we want to do the right thing by you. So that's where I am right now.
Okay, thank you.
What was there was a neighborhood meeting, wasn't there?
Quite some time ago, last summer, when I originally put in this application.
Talk to me about that.
I'm guessing you have the notes on it. I'm wondering if I have them
I
handed.
read through them and I didn't really get a good feel, so that's kind of why I'm.
These,
Concerned about the parking on the street.
I just have the sign-in sheet here. You probably have notes, I guess.
Yeah, So they were concerned about people not parking in the parking lot, which is pretty much what people are always concerned about.
And my understanding from Dave Stroud is the 500 North project, 500 North Main, is that a lot of those tenants have resorted to parking in the driveway or along the street there, because even though it was a pretty clever design, it may not have been as
Yeah, I know, and just those units, I know they've had some occupancy issues of too many people actually living in those. And they had a basement in there, and I know our NPU division has been working on that too.
Well, and there was the whole idea, when we toured it, the idea of being able to get into
I
the
remember that.
garages.
Yeah.
They were tight.
I'm trying
So,
to,
I guess it would help me if we could quantify what your landscaping is, because we're talking about numbers, but we don't have your number. And if I would feel better about it if it looked more like landscaping, but I feel like it's gonna look more like landscaping on the renderings, but in real life, it's gonna look like a parking lot. And on top of the parking lot, you're gonna have the covered parking, which makes it look even more like a parking lot, to me. And that's what we're concerned about for the neighborhood's sake. The project is great. I think we're all, yeah, more affordable senior housing, terrific. Put them wherever we can, but just wondering if this really does fit in the little tiny lot.
as far as the landscaping, I'm open to changing it. We're fitting the code requirement. I'm a believer in buying bigger trees rather than small trees and wait 20 years for them to get big. So we're open to changing. We've tried to meet the code requirement, but if there's some preference on landscaping, that's, I mentioned I'd love to be able to reduce that driveway right on the street, 24 feet wide, if we can go smaller with that. I don't see many times of the day that there's going to be an in and out traffic at the same time that we really need 24 feet there.
How does staff feel about that?
I'd have to look in the code. I don't recall just if it requires 24 or not. Steve, you have it still open there?
I think you've got to have room to go in and out.
In residential, if I remember correctly, I don't have my code in front of me, but I think it does allow a 20-foot. This is something that engineering though runs up against on a regular basis, and it's not just for senior housing, it's for all development. A developer wants to maximize the square footage of the building that they can build. But if it doesn't fit on the lot, or the landscaping doesn't fit, or the driveway size doesn't fit, or whatever doesn't fit, then, we get this almost every day, if not every day, every week. Well, you let this guy and this guy and this guy, but staff really needs to follow the code and not make things up. And if the code says a certain square footage of landscaping, then that's what we're hired to follow. And if we don't think that's right, then we make a change. So, my suggestion would be to consider, maybe that size of a building doesn't fit on that size of a lot. And maybe a 3-unit building that is longer and narrower, so you can get a driveway around the back and pull the building closer to the front. Now, I know that doesn't maximize profits, but you can still get the accesses, the front doors on 3 different sides of the buildings, and you can get the landscaping up front, you can get the parking in the back, and you can get a product that fits the lot. I know that's something that developers don't like to hear, but you're constrained by the size of the lot that you have.
Okay, I think we've got a lot of things on the agenda, so we appreciate your
Hey, do you mind if I add one more thing?
one parting comment.
Okay, one parting comment. One of the concepts we had talked about with staff is this garage in the front. This is a rendering that shows that. This shows it as an open carport. I'd want to put garage doors on there just as well at that point, but it matches the brick and the stucco and the rest of the structure. And then the parking on the one side is open. Dave and I had talked about this prior to this meeting. We're open to doing this if this is something the commission can approve, and it sounds like it may fit the landscaping code. We're still open to this as well.
Does this one give you the number of parking stalls you need?
Yeah, this is still 7. So really all this is, instead of that carport over the 4 stalls, is bringing the garage out from the main structure. So we like the carport because it matches what's next door, but we're certainly willing to do this as well.
I like the look of this one. Looks less parking lot.
Sure.
Yeah, would that require a resubmit, or can this be continued?
I think
or
we could continue this and
continue this and allow
Applications.
Mr. Wheaton and staff to get together? And I think that's probably the approach we ought to take. Let the guys try to work it out and see if they come up with anything else and face it again.
Yeah, and get total landscaping.
Percentages.
The percentage, yeah, know where it's at. Agreed.
I do like the idea of a bigger tree on that corner to block that parking lot a little bit.
It looks like a disco tree, that one. there, right
Maybe not that
to the
shape.
lines.
We could do a line of shrubs about that, where,
And could you talk to Ty also to see if there's
Yeah,
other
glad-
accommodations that can be done?
yeah.
Okay. Because
It would help me, I'm now living in Hawaii, so traveling for these meetings, it would help me to know if, and not a non-committal straw poll, but if we come back with this garage code that has the landscaping information and maybe even masks off that uncovered parking a little bit better, if you're feeling better about this. And
let me make a comment to that. I don't think a straw poll is helpful. I think that if it meets the ordinance, you're entitled to it.
yeah,
And if it doesn't, so that will be what we can work with you and determine if it meets the ordinance, and if it does, then you know you're entitled to it.
I guess my question is, staff has already told me this does not meet the ordinance, but based on what you've said, and that's out of the DRC, based on what you've said, this may.
Well, and I don't recall having seen this, and I don't know what the reasons were why they felt that didn't, so we might have to take a little more time and, look through the ordinance and compare it to what you're doing here and see if it does. If it does, you're going to be good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We need to make
Yes, we need a motion.
what about public comment?
We don't,
No, there-
we don't,
None?
public.
I can make a motion.
No, this is not a public hearing.
Okay. Okay.
Do we need to continue on to a specific date, or?
Yeah, probably would be helpful. I mean, Derek, do you know, you're traveling to and from? I mean, I don't know what works for you.
That will, I don't know, it'll depend on discussions with staff, really, for me. is
Quite
how-
honestly, if he comes up with an alternative that staff believes complies with the ordinance, I don't think he'll need to be here next time. So,
Can it just be continued? Does it need to have a date?
we just have to renotice it then. That's the only thing.
Oh, okay. So if we set the date, it doesn't need to.
Then it doesn't have to be renoticed.
From my
Set it-
perspective,
2 weeks?
we'll work quickly with staff. I'd love to have this on the next agenda meeting.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, if we can get on that agenda, and hopefully we'll have some resolution with staff by then.
And if we need more time, we can continue it again, so.
But I'm prepared to work quickly, and I think staff, there's not a lot of questions left, so hopefully it won't take.
Okay, do we have a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we continue this item to the June 21st meeting.
Mr. Moulton's made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Buxton seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. Dave.
Item 3.2.
3.2, this is a public hearing, so this will take public comment when the time is ready. This involves two proposals here. One is to amend Section 22, or Article 22-8 by enacting Section 22-8-18, which is restriction of uses in the State Street District areas, and then amending the appendix by enacting Appendix WW pertaining to commercial uses in those State Street corridor areas. The map you see on the left, came from the recently approved State Street Master Plan. Those red areas are going to be districts or nodes. Each one of those at some point, hopefully within the next 2 years, will all have their own zoning ordinance that applies to those red areas. We are currently working on the Center Street node area, which is this one right here. That ordinance should be ready to go fairly shortly. So if the council then basically it's going to be in a sense almost like what we had for PD zones. It'll be specific just to that node area within that red. It'll have its own zoning ordinance. So these node areas, that there's the State Street plan kind of identified what we want to see State Street turn into in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so we got looking at the uses that are now permitted. For the most part, all up and down State Street, for the most part, is the C2 zone, general commercial, where most commercial uses are outright permitted right now. And so we got looking at the list of uses that are now permitted in the C2 zone and thought, are all of those, do we want all of those uses to be basically a free-for-all in the node areas? When with those node areas, that's where we're trying to do something different. We want to bring in density, we want to bring in building height, buildings out to the street. Walkable, the term people use is a walkable area. Again, the general plan, this is a long-term plan here. It's going to be developer-driven. It's not going to be the city that's going to come in and do these developments. The developer comes in, these will be then the requirements. And so we looked at the list of uses. We'll go back to that. Here, so these are uses that we went through, which right now would be permitted in the C2 zone. And those would stay permitted in the C2 zone outside of those node areas, but within those node areas, these uses would not be permitted. You want to have gas stations in these node areas. You want to have car sales in these node areas. And so we kind of met as a staff, went through this whole list, and this is what we came up with of what we thought should not be within those node areas. Keep it to office, keep it to, high rise, mixed use, residential above commercial, retail type commercial. So that's what this list is here. And this is language that comes out of the State Street Corridor Master Plan, which kind of guided us towards when we were looking at these uses, which uses to pull out or potentially pull out of those node areas. And so that's what we present to the Planning Commission tonight, which you'll make a recommendation to the City Council, is to basically amend the appendix to add these two maps here to Appendix WW, which would be a new appendix, and then amend the put this language here into the zoning ordinance itself.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Don't think I have any either. Okay.
As far as the no goes, if any of these uses are in those nodes now, that's great. They could operate that way for 100 years. No one's going to force them out. It'd just be at the time where perhaps a developer comes in and acquires 2, 3, 4 pieces of property, puts those together, does something new. The use would not then be able to go back once they're removed. But the existing ones could stay as long as they'd like.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point.
I've seen some of these kind of communities that we're trying to do. One of the things I saw in here, and it may be nothing, but nursery plants. I've actually seen like a little small flower shop in a community that had like these nodes.
We actually we have a land use for a florist, which could be somewhat like a flower shop. Then this would be, open plants,
Okay.
Sun River Gardens or,
Okay.
Some of the other bigger ones that have that stock all over the place.
Right. Got it.
So most little retail shops would
Yeah.
fit within the
Yes.
So we're not trying to
Right.
exclude those. Thank you.
And then again, outside in the C2 zone, these could still be located in between the node areas. These would still be okay.
Okay. If there are no other questions, this is a public hearing, as are the rest of the items on the agenda this evening. And so I'd just like to make a few comments before we open this public hearing. That is, we do want to hear your comments. The comments need to be limited to 3 minutes per person. You cannot give your time to someone else. And we ask you to be respectful of both other people here and of the commission. There's only one comment per person, and we remind you that this is recorded and placed on YouTube. So with that, we'll open this public hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this item, if you'd please step to the microphone, state your name, and whatever your comment is. Seeing no one step to the microphone, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Any comments or discussion? We ready to make a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I make a motion enacting section 22-8-18, restrictions on uses in State Street district areas, amending Appendix A and enacting Appendix WW pertaining to the restrictions of commercial uses within State Street corridor district areas.
It's a recommendation
Oh,
Yeah, this is a
recommendation.
forward.
Rec-
What are
For the city council, sir,
recommendation to the
Yeah.
council.
Yes.
to send a positive
Yes,
recommendation.
send a positive recommendation.
I'll second that, the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 4.1.
Item 4.1, this is a public hearing for request to rezone property. This would be property located at 1519 West, 400 South. It's about 3.75 acres. The applicant requests that the current zones of R20 and C2 be changed to M1. And here's the property you see on the map in the blue. It's located between the railroad tracks, also railroad spur that comes south of the property as well. I can see the uses to the east across this tracks, industrial to the west, for the most part is vacant, and the old vineyard nursery. Industrial property use also to the north. The map you see on the left is the current zone map. The map on the right is the general plan. So the general plan gives us the guide for the future. The general plan has identified this property as being most appropriate for light industrial. Then you see the map on the left. The south portion of the property, for some reason, is zoned residential. It was never a good residential location. And then the north half would be then commercial, the C2 zone. Well, going from the general plan, it says the most appropriate land use there would be some type of industrial, and the light industrial would be allowed to be, the applicant go to the M1 zone, which is not as heavy, a little less intense uses as the M2. M1 sits between the CM and the M2 zone. And so that's what the applicant requests, is to go to the M1 zone. This is kind of a concept plan. It's still in the works. It gives you an idea of what the applicant would like to do. Put in a building there with a few different tenant spaces, perhaps another building in the back, just for light industrial type uses. He does have an applicant, or excuse me, does have a user that would like to use part of one of these buildings already. So that's been the impetus then to get this rezone going forward.
Any questions for Mr. Stroud? Seems like a good use. This is a public hearing, so, I'm sorry. Oh, is the applicant here? Are there any comments you'd like to make?
No, I'm here representing Brian Christensen and Mark Warner, who are the applicants, and we don't have any other comments.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bypass you. Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone that would like to make a comment, please step to the microphone. Could you state your name, please?
As soon as you get here.
Yeah, when you get here.
My name's David Busey. I'm just curious to know what the neighbors in the residential zone to the south think about it, since it would have previously constituted a buffer for them. Has there been any input from the neighborhood?
The applicant hold a neighborhood meeting, and you have those minutes before you there.
Yeah, they're right here. Their comments looked positive to me. It says, looks good, good size. Is this the right one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good size. Both attendees reviewed plans and asked questions. Meeting adjourned at 6:30. It was just a handwritten note. And
I wasn't sure what it said. It says looking forward to not having
Machinery and noise.
on property.
It's a
But-
crusher.
but
There's a crusher on that site right now.
there's been some mechanical
Oh, so
there.
they're thinking it's going to be less. Okay.
Well, that's the plan. It's going to be less.
I don't know what else could be on that site between two railroad tracks. There's not going to be housing there for sure.
Yeah, and you look at, and the tracks themselves provide somewhat of a buffer, and actually the
Yeah.
shape of the property too, because as it tapers to the back, you're not going to get a building back there either. Could be passive stuff of some type of storage, but those residents are probably going to be more closely located to those other industrial uses to the east than once this property develops than to the buildings that'll be on the north end of this lot.
There were actually only 2 attendees that I'm showing at that meeting.
Right.
And the property just to the west of this one is not at risk right now, even though it's shown to be, the big empty lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's community commercial.
right. So if you look there in the general plan, that piece there, it says, right now it's zoned R20, which is a single-family residential, 20,000 square foot lots. Nobody's going to build a 20,000 square foot lot there. But the general plan has identified that should be commercial at some point in the future.
But this does not affect that.
This is not, okay,
No, this is only affecting the parcel between.
that's all I have, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no one else step to the microphone, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Any comments or discussion?
Seems a logical thing to do.
It's like the right thing to do.
I'll go ahead and make a motion then that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council amending section 22-5-3A and the zoning map of Orem City by changing the zone on 3.75 acres from the C2 zone and R20 zone to the M1 zone at 1519 West 400 South. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Item 4.2, this is also a rezone, a public hearing with a recommendation to the city council. This involves a residential piece of property this time. The applicant, Mr. Alex Cross, has a piece of property at 166 South, 1000 East, which is currently zoned R8. Property identified here in blue. You can see it has frontage on 950 East and 1000 East. Currently, there's a house along 1000 East, as well as from what I recall, the applicant has a very old, dilapidated house, which is not used as a house anymore, behind the existing house. So the current zone on the property, on the zone map here you see is yellow, that is the R8 zone. It also coincides with the general plan zone as well, which is low density residential. The applicant would like to subdivide that into 2 lots. The existing house on the east would stay, then there'd be a new lot created on the west on 950 East, which would be for a single family home. However, the current zone, the R8 zone, requires 8,000 square feet. It requires a lot to be 80 feet wide. So the applicant would like to rezone the property and change the general plan to a designation that would then accommodate a smaller zone. In this case, would be the R6 zone. R6 requires a 60-foot wide lot and a lot that's at least 6,000 square feet. So the applicant would, so if this is approved, then the applicant then could come back in for a 2-lot subdivision, divide the property into 2 lots. We would also get the completion of the little knuckle there of 950, where currently right now it's missing asphalt, curb, gutter, and sidewalk. There have been a few rezones like this recently approved by the council in the past, where an applicant came in and just rezoned a small section of property to accommodate the subdivision of it could have been a large enough lot where it was more appropriate to have 2 lots instead of 1. And this would be, in staff's opinion, very similar to those as well.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Stroud? The other areas around this are all R8. This would be.
Right, yeah, the zone map there, you have the one section of R5 there. That R5 was rezoned, probably in 2002, 2003. We no longer have the R5 zone in the city. That was used as kind of an infill zone. If the council did not get rid of it, this would have been a great candidate for that R5, what that R5 zone was for. But the next zone up now is now R6.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present? Any comments that you would like to make? Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and anyone who would like to make a comment, please step to the microphone. Give us your name. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Comments or
I was concerned just reading about it, but then when I went and looked at it, it seemed to fit in, and so it doesn't seem like a problem. Just because of changing it, giving it an R6 status, when everything else around it's R8, it kind of concerned me, but it doesn't seem like there's a problem.
It'd be good use for that property on that west side. It fits just fine. I thought the same thing, that's why I drove by, and I actually been to that house before, dropping my son off. but it looks like it fits.
Okay. This is a recommendation to the city council. Anyone ready to make a motion?
I am ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we send a positive recommendation to the city council amending the Orem general plan use map by changing designation from low-density residential to medium-density residential and amending section 22.5-5-3A, 22, yeah, -5-3A, and the zoning map of Orem City by rezoning property at 166 South, 1000 East from the R8 zone to the R6 zone.
Mr. Cochran's made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Moulton seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 4.3.
Oh, no.
Item 4.3 is another rezone as well, a public hearing with a recommendation to the city council. This is a request from Woodbury Corporation, owners and developers of University Place. They have a request to rezone 2 different areas adjacent to the mall, and then amend the text which coincides with the PD 34 zone. So this takes place, the general address for the mall is 575 East University Parkway. Site specifically as far as the rezones, we'll get to those here. Property 1175 South State Street, property seen in blue, and then in the cross-hatching, white cross-hatching on the map on the right. That is the location of the Wells Fargo Bank, currently zoned C2. This property owned by Woodbury. They would like to rezone that property to the PD 34 zone, which is again the zone that encompasses University Place now. The thought is they would tear that building down, build a new 2-tenant building. As the public now knows, one would be for Trader Joe's, and the other unit would then be for the bank. So the bank would then be relocated back on site with the drive-through. But obviously to do so, they need to rezone the property, do a new subdivision plat as well. Now we're in the process of working with them right now. But again, the rezone will be required. The second rezone would be up at the southwest corner of 800 South and 800 East. Those properties he identified in blue were all home sites at one time for the most part. The owner has purchased those properties, torn those houses down, and they would now like to encompass that property in the PD 34 zone as well, which was the intent when this zone came through 3 or 4 years ago, was at some point these adjacent properties would then be pursued to be rezoned to the PD 34 zone. So the applicant would like to then pursue development of that property then in the near future. One thing they would also have to do then is amend Appendix BB. BB contains the supplemental material like sample building elevations, the signage, the setback maps, the concept plan. So these next 2 slides here show the various specific exhibits in Appendix BB that would then have to be modified. So basically, they're just including those properties that are being rezoned into these maps, so then you can then govern those properties as far as setbacks go, or if signage applies, those types of regulations. And so the map you see on the left would be the existing conditions. On the right, then they'd identify those properties coming in. You can see, that one is right down here, and then the others are up in here. Those would come into the mixed use designation, which then allow them to pursue either residential, commercial, office. Right now, the applicant is thinking, obviously, the ones on 8 South, 8th East most likely would be a residential designation. Perhaps some commercial, they said, that may face Costco, but that's really just a residential location now. And of course, the other location, we know what's already planned for that site. And adding to identify what the landscape requirements are, the setback requirements, and if there are any kind of signage requirements, again, including those properties.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No.
Okay, is the applicant present? Please state your names and make any comments that you would like to make.
So Chris Longson, representing the Woodburys, and only comment I'd make is that, this is just doing the extension as we originally intended to do. Meets the same, setbacks as we had before. It's just continuing the zone on those parcels. So we're not changing anything other than incorporating the zone and meeting those same requirements. And so unless you have other questions, we don't have any further comment.
It's my understanding that it was always intended to be included in this particular PD zone, was it not? Okay, any questions that anyone has for the applicants? Okay, thank you very much. This is a public hearing. We'd invite anyone who would like to speak to this item to come to the microphone at this time. If you could state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Shelley Parcell. I live in the neighborhood just north of this. My only concern about this, and I do agree that the PD zone has been great and their vision is good. My concern is giving the blanket permissions of all the PD zone to this particular area, because originally, like you said, the original intent was, well, when this idea was sold to the public anyway, that the property along 8th South they were going to line residential with residential. But now we have Quick Quack. That was the very first thing that went along that new zone. So I would like more clarification and maybe limitations on what's going to happen on that side of the property, because originally we were told it would be residential, and the very first thing they did was not. And it's not only not residential, but it's loud. So that's my concern. That would be my request of you, is that we actually further clarify and limit what's going to happen there, and not just give all of the same permissions with the zone in that particular area.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no one else coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Would you be able to respond to that, please?
Yeah, as far as the residential zone that was identified specifically having just residential was along 800 East, not 800 South, and Quick Quack over on 800 South, where there are commercial designations where commercial could go, and that's what was approved. And and even before that, they were identified as commercial parcels already out there in front of Costco, and so the zone didn't restrict residential, and it wasn't represented to only be residential on 800 South. That was over on 800 East where the zone was, and it showed that still shows that on the approved zoning.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from staff? Okay.
I was just going to say, I was under that same impression that those pieces where Quick Quack and some of those others have always been commercial. Like it was pads that were available to be subdivided. In fact, Quick Quack, I believe, subdivided that or something, as I remember.
Line adjustment.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got a little bit of shopping just above it there too. There is some commercial, but I remember similar to what you were just telling us there, as far as 8th East.
Do we know what the plan is for the rest of that 800 South, where it fronts 800 South?
So on 800 South, that as Dave pointed out, that on 800 South, it's a mixed use zone. It's not restricted to just residential. It could be a mix of residential or commercial, and that's what we're continuing to propose on 800 South. And you can see as you come off of the corner in there, the residential restriction when you're not on the corner would apply to 800 East, other than the very corner property.
750 East will be vacated? Is that intended to remain, or will or does it?
That would be vacated. Is what we are going to propose. So, because it doesn't serve that property anymore. So.
Okay. Other comments or discussion? Someone like to make a motion?
I'll take a shot at it. Okay. I'd make a motion that we send a positive recommendation to the City Council amending Section 22-5-3A and the zoning map of Orem City by changing the zone on 4.87 acres from the C2 zone and the R8 zone to the PD 34 zone, generally located at 800 South, 800 East, amending Section 22-5-3A and the zoning map of Orem City by changing the zone on 0.60 acres from the C2 zone to the PD 34 zone, at 1175 South State Street, and amending Appendix BB as it relates to the concept plan and residential density of the PD 34 zone at 575 East University Parkway.
Mr. Walker's made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cochran seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I can see why you were hesitant to make a motion. That was a long. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Wordy.
Item 4.4.
Item 4.4, this is going to be a presentation given by not city staff, but a contract that was awarded to develop a parks master plan. And so the representative will be here, and I'll just help scroll through then the slides here.
Thank you very much. My name's Mark Vlasic. I'm the president and owner of Landmark Design. We're a community planning and landscape architecture firm in Salt Lake City. We've been working on this project for the last 7 months, having a number of public meetings, working with the steering committee and staff to take a look at the future needs for parks, recreation, and trails and open space in the city. Okay. So what I'd like to do is quickly walk you through what's contained in the plan, and then I'm here to answer any questions. So the purpose is really to make sure that this plan is comprehensive, that we've taken a close look at what you have existing today on record, and that we provide policy direction for yourselves and for the City Council, particularly focusing on the next 10 years and then looking beyond to build out, which is about 2060 is according to our estimates. It's broken into 6 chapters. We first look at parks and open space, then at recreation. This is recreation that is independent from parks, so facilities, mainly buildings, swimming pools, stuff like that. Trails, we worked very closely with staff and with an existing trails plan, and tried to coordinate it and update it as part of this process. Chapter 5 is where we take a look at money, in particular what priorities in acquisition and construction for the future, and then we conclude with the goals and policies section. This is a graphic that illustrates our process. Where we are today is where we have the draft plan. As I mentioned, we had a number of meetings leading up to this. We tried to engage the public on multiple platforms. And I think the next slide highlights that. But it's basically that we had a scoping meeting in the beginning. We had pretty good attendance from the public. We've had a website. We've engaged in social media. We had a draft plan open house in April. And again, we met with our advisory committee twice and with staff on at least a half dozen times. The other thing that we coordinated was a survey that conducted by Y2 Analytics. This is a defensible survey. It's within 97% of being accurately reflecting the general views of the public. Top priorities in Orem are for upgrading the fitness center and developing more public trails. The fitness center is used quite regularly by a number of residents, and overall, the fitness center and trails, 88% of the residents have their desires met through those facilities. From parks, the main reason that people use a particular park is that it's close to home. So distribution of parks is very important. They are generally, the public was opposed to things that are going to cost a lot of money. So that was good to see from the very beginning that people were considering that this isn't just a paper plan with an unachievable wish list. And then bathrooms came out as an issue, as did lighting of parks and trails, that public safety and access to extended hours in the parks was an issue. This is just some graphics that illustrate one of the first things we did is look at the demographics. Orem is a maturing community. It was projected that in 10 years you'll increase by about 6,000 people, and then at build out it'll be a total of about 28,000 more people than today. That your age, your family size, and your household size is getting smaller, which is not the same as most communities in Utah County. The average age is also declining slightly, it's rising slightly, which is different than the general area, and that your household size is getting smaller. So it's really showing that you're changing, that you're maturing, that there's a need to provide more than sports fields and other things, but to meet the needs of an aging population. We took a very extensive look at all of your park sites. We classified them and calculated the acreage that's covered today. We're careful not to include things that don't provide typical park amenities as we did this, because it's really important. Part of this study is we were aligning it with the current impact fee assessment. If we include acreages that can't be justified, it makes them open for litigation. So we were very careful of coordinating with our economic planner, who is the primary consultant of this project. And basically, as you can see, the bulk of your parks are large parks, regional or community parks, and then followed by neighborhood parks, and then you have one single small mini park. Why this is important is that we calculate what we call a level of service. If we go to the next slide, basically we take that acreage, divide it by the current population, and multiply by 1,000. It tells you that you have about 2.77 acres per 1,000 people at present. If we go to the next slide, we also, at that point, take a close look at how parks are distributed, because that, in particular, since the public indicated that's important. So if we go to the next drawing here, this is a map that shows how we've put a radius around each of the parks according to their size and function, and to see where the community is well served. And as you can see in the dark gray, there's 3 areas with gaps, one on the northwest corner of the community, one by the southwest, and one in the northeast, a small one in the northeast. So before we proceeded further with projecting for the future, we took into account of what it will take to fill these gaps. And basically, we're recommending that 2 parks, at least 5 acres in size, be built in that area to the northwest, the gap 1, the large gap. That the area to the right, northeast, is very small. We're recommending that an extension of Share Apple Park happen there, so that that provides a better park amenity for that neighborhood. And then in the gap number 2, that in the long run, that's the one in the southwest edge, that a large community park be built in the long run. So once we add those 10 acres plus the 0.3 acres for the extension of 1.3 acres for Share Apple Park, that we have 273.8 acres at present. We divide that again by the population. That means that the adjusted amount for your level of service is 2.89 acres per 1,000 people. That is then projected forward to come up with your needs for park acreage for the future. If we go to the next slide, that's showing in the 3rd bar that you'll need an additional almost 15 acres to meet needs in 10 years, and an additional 66.5 acres over the next 40 years or so. So one of the aspects of this plan was to really take a look at how that might be met, and we actually came up with some new categories of parks for the future, particularly since you're urbanizing and densifying along the State Street corridor. It's going to be very important that there's adequate parks to meet the needs of the expected greater population in those areas. And so we're recommending urban parks and sort of special small parks that meet those the needs in those areas, and at the same time that in the longer run that we look at the addition of a couple of large parks down by the lake shore. We've also taken a look at your standards for parks and adjusted them so that as parks are built in the future, that they meet a minimum level of service, so that this is important for, particularly for projecting costs in the future, and that we determine, since people are concerned about the access to restrooms, that there's been an attempt to increase the hours of those operations and the dates that they'll be open. And that for your open space, that we acquire open space as the opportunities arise, that there are no real typical open spaces in Orem, but that there are opportunities to acquire some older farmland and that sort of thing, particularly along the lake shore. For recreation, the key thing there was the upgrade of the Orem Fitness Center. There's a study ongoing now, and so what's going to come out of that is going to give a direction of how to proceed with that. And then the continuing to work with groups such as Sarah and the other groups in providing a really robust recreation and cultural programming opportunities in the community. With trails, we worked with staff and on the existing trails master plan, the 2010 plan, and we took a look at the State Street plan to make sure that trails are going to be well served, or going to serve the community well into the future. The key thing was a focus on regional trails so that connect with the surrounding communities, and multi-use paths, so separated from the roadway, and continue to implement a mountain to lakeshore trail system, so east to west through the community, and provide more connections to the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. On bike facilities, we are sort of deferring to the 2010 plan, and that the actions that are recommended there should be implemented and continue to take place. We're also recommending that there's a current program now that if there's more than 10% cost increase to include streets or trails as part of street upgrades, that's sort of the limit. We're recommending an increase to 20% to facilitate that sort of enhancement in the future, and that there's just continued education and improvements with lighting and safety to encourage those people who want to use trails throughout the community. 5 new trailheads are being recommended on the Provo upgrade, and the upgrade of the Provo Canyon trailhead, addressing hotspots where you have conflicts with that conflict with where trails meet traffic. Basically, we identified about 12 of those locations. Establish a dedicated funding source for trail implementation particularly during the next 10 years, and establish a bicycle and pedestrian commission so that the concerns and needs of trails become part of the government process. From acquisition construction costs, we first took a look at what's needed to upgrade the existing parks and amenities, and they're fairly minor. You do have a sand volleyball court that is not in, it's an adequate facility, but not a state-of-the-art facility. According to our assessments, you're lacking in sand volleyball, but speaking with staff, that's not a big issue. So we're recommending that facility be upgraded into sort of a state-of-the-art facility with lighting and other things, so that to see how that plays out, and if that increases demand, then we monitor that in the future. The same with basketball. There's so much basketball access through churches and other things in the community. There's no real demand for that, so we're not recommending more outdoor basketball unless people ask for it. Pickleball is something that's coming up in all communities as a big need or desire, so we're recommending some caution and start out with 8 pickleball courts for now, and then see how demand, if it continues to rise, that additional facilities may be needed in the future. and that we're recommending the addition of one additional skate park or skate spot, or we call them skate spots. They're not just a skate park, but taking some of the elements of a skate park and spreading them around a community, around a neighborhood, particularly in a downtown area. That's been done very successful in the Daybreak community in South Jordan, and we think it could fit in for certain neighborhoods here. As far as the cost, we're looking at about $1.3 million to upgrade your existing parks to meet those existing standards. In addition to acquiring and constructing your parks for the future, we're looking at a total of about $19 million. We're actually adjusting these numbers right now. We're making some adjustments in the acquisition costs, so these costs are likely to go down slightly. For your trails, it's about $17 million for the completion of your trail system. It's a very robust system that we're looking at, and when in addition, we're talking about this annual budget for implementing so that we really make a big push during the next 10 years. So we're looking at $857,000 each year. So basically get $10 million worth of improvements, or $9 million over the next 10 years, and then continue it but slow it down over the next 40 years so that we have the system fully complete in 40 years, but probably about 90% complete in the next 10 years. So the total cost that we envision, not including the upgrade to the rec center, is $36 million over the through build out. In addition, we've been working with staff to really, during the last 10 years since the downturn of the economy, there's been just a deferred maintenance going on, and also just there's a lot of catch up that needs to happen. So we've been working with them to develop a budget to get caught up over the next 10 years, and that's currently estimated around $9.5 million. We are, again, meeting in the next week or so to further refine that number, but the idea is that that would be distributed over the next 10 years, and then that the budgets will be reviewed to ensure that this doesn't happen again, and that there's a general good funding for your parks, trails, and everything else in the future. So I think we can pass this one here. Your goals and policies are really important because it's what helps particularly the city council make decisions about budgeting here. So we have a very specific action plan, and that's tied into the goals and policies for the future. So it really helps remind decision makers such as yourselves of what the vision is for the future once this gets adopted. Is that last slide? So that's a summary. I think you each received a copy of the plan. We have it on the project webpage, and that can be linked in through the Orem webpage. So if anybody's interested to take a closer look at it, the details are there. Thank you.
Thank you. So the $9 million in maintenance is in addition to the $36 million in...
Yes, and it won't be funded in the same way. That's what we're trying to figure out right now. A big part of this plan was aligning it with the impact fees that are going on right now. But it's that's likely to come down slightly, but it is an addition.
And as a master plan, I mean, these are recommendations that you're making that would allow the city to accomplish those goals within the specified time period, but that would depend on funding from the council and
that's exactly right.
So forth.
Are there any federal grants available, state or federal?
There's quite a few, and as part of that Chapter 5, we include a complete list of different grants and other funding opportunities.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Vlasic?
It's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
That's chump change. Come on, Carlos.
Have decisions or does the master plan recommend where all of those different amenities are to be placed, or is that something that staff would do down the road as
It depends. Some of them were very specific about where they're located. Others are general, that you maybe need 4 new playgrounds or 10 new playgrounds. Staff knows where they need to go, and we didn't put them in order to not make the plan any more complicated. We didn't put them in, but focused on the numbers and didn't get into the specific needs of each, but used a general cost point for each of them, so that it was, again, a lot of this is to establish a reasonable funding tool by the council later.
Okay. Questions? Okay, this item is a public hearing, and we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anyone who'd like to make comments to come forward, please.
Dave Busaith again. I was noticing that the public requested improvements in restrooms, but I didn't see. Are there any funds suggested for dramatically improving the restrooms, not just making them open more? For instance, in Orem Community Park, the restrooms are really deficient and ancient.
Part of the deferred maintenance that you were speaking.
It is.
Yeah. That's been, Dave, because of that deferred maintenance since the downturn. But
So the answer might be yes then, if
Yeah.
there's enough money in the deferred maintenance budget.
No, I think the answer is yes, is it not?
There is, what we have in there has been, the staff has actually gone through each of the restrooms that are inadequate and come up with a number for each of them that will bring it up to code. And also, if they need to be upgraded for lighting and running them for later in the year, if they have lighting or heating, that sort of thing. So it's very specific for the ones that have been determined to be delinquent.
And there are little signs in there that says, brethren, please lift the seat. Is that in there also?
I think there's budget for that as
Okay,
well.
all right, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Comments or discussion?
This was lots of work. Thank you.
It's very comprehensive.
And you feel certain on that 95%, or the 3% plus or minus on that? You had a good power curve on that? And
I have faith in our colleague, consultants, yes.
I only say that because my doctoral minor is statistics, and I love a good statistical analysis.
You should really take a look in more detail at the way they did it. It's pretty interesting.
Okay.
It's a different sort of process than we typically use.
It looks nice. It's just a lot of money if they can come up with the funding for it.
That will be the challenge.
What's the city done in past decades, I guess, in funding stuff like this?
Have we had a Parks Master Plan before?
Yeah. Nope.
You have, but it's been not nearly as comprehensive, and it's been out of date for quite a while. My understanding is that the Orem was had a lot of foresight about acquiring land and developing it when the city was in the throes of big development back in the 60s and or earlier, so that there was a acquisition of the large tracts of land happened when it was available. And that's the difference between now. We're running out of land, and the land that is there is more expensive, and areas where growth is happening is where it's already developed. So that's why we're developing new models to meet the future need. But we always make the recommendation, if you need to buy parkland, regardless of the price, buy it now and don't wait 10 years. Don't wait 30 years, because the price is exponentially higher. So even though that sounds like a big ticket number, if there is opportunity to acquire some of your land earlier than later, that's I think a good recommendation. But that in the past it's best been the city acquired it and developed it as they could. there wasn't a, for example, a standard like we have, or we're recommending.
Yes.
You know, I can just tell you in the, I don't know, last 15 years or so, the city has actually spent quite a lot of money developing new parks. There was the Lakeside Sports Park with the softball fields and the soccer fields down there. That was a major project, obviously. There was the Nielsen's Grove Park project. A lot of money was invested there. The Timpanogos Park up the canyon was also, at least some of those parks, the city issued some bonds to fund the acquisition of property and the development of those properties. And of course, more recently, you've got the dog park that's been done. So the city has really done, I think, quite a lot in the last 15 years or so.
And the park, the playground area here in the city center.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Well taken. Okay, are we ready for a motion? Anyone like to make that motion?
Your turn.
Well, oops, I just lost my page. Make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council, adopting the City of Orem Parks, Recreation Trails, and Open Space Map, and amending the Orem City General Plan to include the City of Orem Parks, Recreation Trails, and and Open Space Master Plan as Appendix G.
Ms. Jeffries has made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cochran seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll take a break. Anticipating the next item is going to take a little bit of time, we will take a 10-minute break. Do we have to make a motion for that?
10 minute? Really?
5 minutes? 5 minutes. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. We'll reconvene at 6:15. You want to take over now?
No.
Concept plan, Mass Roberts, your elevations, materials, landscaping. Okay. The other things that will go also in the appendix too. These I don't think necessarily, that one probably won't go in the appendix because that can change, that's UTs. Yep. This one, because you're identifying where you're doing that, we'll just show them that by kind of a bullet point of some of what's going on, PD zone things, and then the UU agreements needed. And Paul's got his whole traffic. That's what I have.
Okay. We just have responses to Paul's portion and.
Okay, we'd like to go ahead and gather back so that we can continue.
I'm going to hide over here because I'm going to run the timer for when the public hearing comes up and give Lori a, so she's not trying to run all over here. Item 4.5, this is the last item on the agenda. This is a request for a creation of a PD zone, rezoning property, and then enacting the appropriate appendix for the supplemental materials. This concerns property generally at 1000 South, 400 east from to go to the PD 48 zone, 400 West, excuse me. Property you see here outlined in the blue. This is pretty much known as the Palos Verdes neighborhood. The developer, the applicant, which is PEG Development, has purchased most of the properties you see in blue, all except the one on the south side, which is not highlighted, with anticipation to get a PD zone to have a student housing project approved. Obviously right on the east side of campus. From a planning standpoint, a land use standpoint, a great location for student housing because you're right next to campus. The red ring you see there on the aerial photo, that is the 1,200-foot notification boundary where notices were sent to concerning the project. I was having trouble with my mapping program today, so I had to go to a basic map, but this is the zone map you see on the right with the property highlighted, and again, also the notification boundary. Not sure why we're having problems here with the flickering, but well, we're plugged in there. Current zone is R8. The yellow, as you see there, the general plan calls it out as low density residential. It encompasses about 8.33 acres. I may have to switch back over. Let's do that. See if this solves that.
Oh, sorry. I'm just looking at it thinking, what in the heck? Okay, sorry.
Okay, then of course Sean Heaton is the neighborhood chair, and this involves the Sunset Heights East neighborhood. And again, the 1,200-foot notification boundaries you see. So just some of the colors here on the map. The yellow is the R8 zone. The kind of the purplish color, that's the business park, which is the UVU campus. R12 in the green, 12,000 square foot minimum lots. The R8 is an 8,000 square foot. To the south of the proposed project says PRD. There was a PRD there approved at one time. Never did come to construction, and then UVU then purchased the property and built the parking lot and some other uses there. This is the concept plan for the project. It would contain 331 units. There is the potential to have a phase 2. This would be phase 1 with 1,132 beds. At the parking requirement, we would like to see at 0.8 stalls per bed. That would then require 906 parking stalls. That would be accomplished by some surface parking under some of the buildings on a pedestal type configuration, and then a parking garage along 400 West. These are the proposed elevations you see here. Each of these elevations are identified by a number, and so we have number 1 and number 2, and if you look at the bottom diagram, you'll see a red arrow indicating which view corresponds to which elevation. Just to point out, this would then be the parking garage view from 400 West would be this elevation drawing there. Obviously, that would have the biggest impact to adjacent neighbors as you get further in the project, not so much. This is the list of materials. So there's a number and a letter code. And you can see at the top would be the materials on the number. The letter code would then be the color. And they give a representation on the bottom screen there of what each of those materials and colors then are. And these would be diagrams that would be included as part of the appendix as the supplemental material. Should the council approve the zone in the future, then you'd reference these when they would come in for site plan approval. Everything would have to match or closely comply with what's then approved as part of the appendix for the concept plan, the elevations, colors, materials, that sort of thing. And the landscape plan and the number of trees. This is just a little different version of the black and white. The first slide was the concept plan in black and white. This gives a little more detail as far as easier to identify where the buildings are. Just to point out, as you see here, this is one property that the applicant does not own. Because that's still a residence, they would still have to provide public street access to that property. So the road would continue in here, and they'd have to construct a public cul-de-sac with a 96-foot radius. It's minimum required for fire code to provide public access to the Roberts house. And this would be the parking garage here, and the various buildings then to the west of there. You can see various access points coming out onto UVU streets. That would go through the parking lot there on the south, and of course this would stay open in the meantime. Should the Roberts house be purchased, that street and that cul-de-sac would then go away. This would be the potential for a phase 2, in which case you would have a central parking structure with then units surrounding the parking structure itself.
That looks like it's without the Roberts house, right?
Right.
So that's
right.
the potential.
That can only happen if the cul-de-sac and the Roberts
That's
house.
gone.
Right.
Okay.
And then the 960 south goes away as well, the whole street, so there would not be an access onto 400 west, correct?
No, this would, go back to my pen. No, this access here would remain. There'd be the two access points.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10th, 1,000, 10th south, not
Right.
my,
Still the one to the south.
sorry.
I think you're talking about Palos Verdes Drive.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Disappear.
Yeah. Which, was in this configuration where the cul-de-sac was like that. These would be examples of signage that they would use. They'd obviously have signage to identify the project. There would be some interior signage. These kiosk signs you see here are very similar to what you see if you've been to the mall lately. The interior kiosk signs, obviously Woodbury Corporation is a partner in this project, so they use some similar interior signs just for interior notification of events, facilities, whatever may be on site. Types of buildings, similar construction, these would all be approved as part of the appendix. So they have to come back in, and they'd have to, what they would have approved for signs or buildings would have to represent or closely match what you see in these drawings or these pictures here. This exhibit on the left, this just gives current bus configuration, bus routes. This would not actually be part of the appendix, but it's just showing you where current UTA bus routes are served around the campus, around the project. Again, just to show you there's the project right there. And the picture you see on the right, that just gives some more numbers as far as how they could reduce car usage, bike facilities. Obviously, right next to campus is an ideal location for student housing. People can walk to campus right across the street. If your student of yours doesn't have a car, great place to house them, obviously, because they would need a car to get back and forth to school. And of course, with the PD zone, you have to have PD zone text. You have the full text. This is kind of a bullet point of the major issues, or not issues, but the major points. We would be creating the PD 48 zone, Plan Development 48. 48 is just the next number we have in order for PD zones. Then Appendix UU as well would be the next one available we've been working on. The uses would be limited to condominiums, apartments, and student housing. There would be a limited commercial use inside the buildings for the students. Could be, a copy center. It could be a small little place they can go buy a gallon of milk, loaf of bread, that type of thing. And that would only be permitted on the west side of the building. Anything that faces campus was where those would be. Maximum height would be 65 feet. Setbacks would vary from 35 feet along 960 South and Campus Drive to 25 feet along 400 West, 20 feet from any other public street, 10 feet from any private street, and then UVU property is adjacent again to the west and to the south. In those cases, those setbacks would be 20 and 10 respectively. Again, architectural style, materials, landscape plan, concept plan, all those would be part of the appendix, and when they would come back in for site plan approval, those would then have to match those plans. Again, signage would be specific to the site, identifying the project, whatever the name ends up being, would be an identification sign, that sort of thing. 0.8 parking stalls per bed, and that would be in a bedroom of 110 square feet or less. If you have a bedroom of 115, say, then we'd have to have 2 parking stalls. I believe all their bedrooms are 106 square feet or less, so they'd be considered one occupancy unit, one bed or 0.8 stalls per bed in that case. They would have bike parking at the rate of 10% of the on-site parking stalls. For this project, obviously, to work, it's going to need some cooperation with UVU, and these are all agreements that the applicant is working on. We don't have signed agreements yet, but these are all things that the applicant needs from UVU. They're going to connect into sewer and water facilities on UVU property, so we need agreements to allow that. Same with stormwater retention and drain lines. Going to hook into existing facilities that run through UVU. They need UVU's approval. There would be a no-build easement. If on the concept plan, the buildings on the west side go right up to the property line. To prevent any building code issues, in theory, UVU could then build on their property right next to the student housing building. So if we do a no-build easement, that prevents anybody from building anything right next to, on the west side of the building through a no-build easement. You see that a lot in downtown areas with skyscrapers that go out to property line with no-build easements. Access and egress from the site through UVU is needed. Obviously, to get to the project, for the most part, you're going to have to go through UVU property. Pedestrian access to UVU, there's through the existing sidewalks. They do plan on building a pedestrian underpass under Campus Drive. Again, approval needed through UVU, it's UVU's property. Just to get around to construct the project, construction access easements. There would be a contribution to a future traffic light at 960 South and 400 West. 960 South would be widened for part of the project to allow better traffic demand getting in and out of the project. And then there's still the possibility, the applicant at one time was talking to UVU. On site, they initially had 0.65 stalls per bed. We were requiring 0.8. And at one time, they're going to have an agreement with UVU to lease stalls in their 2 parking lots. I don't know if that's still a backup plan for the applicant, but there's still the potential there that they may still get some stalls in any case. Part of the project this size obviously requires a traffic impact study, and that was done. And then our staff, Paul Goodrich, looked at that traffic impact study, and these are his slides now, so I'll turn this over to him and let him run through his issues here.
Typically, the first question I get asked when a zoning project comes in is, how much traffic is it going to generate? Well, typically we go to that slide first, but since we were unable to come to a agreement with the traffic consultant that was hired, I need to go through, I feel like I need to go through a little bit of a process to help explain why we're on different pages. In the Institute of Transportation Engineer Handbook, there is no student housing land use information. I think one of the reasons why that is so is because although there have been multiple studies done across the country, there's an extreme range of data. And so you really can't get anything that's statistically accurate. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they've decided not to provide that information. However, the North Carolina Department of Transportation and the Florida Department of Transportation have decided that internally they've wanted to do their own studies. And they've gone to several university campuses in their states and they've done their studies. Florida basically has recommended that whenever they do a traffic analysis, when a new student housing zone is proposed, that they use what's the ITE apartment per person trip rate, which is, I've skipped North Carolina. Anyway, while I'm at Florida, which is the ITE apartment per person is 3.35 per day. But again, statistically, it was as low as 1.89 and as high as 5.85. North Carolina found a range between 4.41 and 6.35 with a high of 7.46. The reason they had a range is basically they said that the closer you to get to campus, actually the higher the rate is. So staff, engineering staff looked at this, several of us, and we decided to make the recommendation to take the ITE, apartment per person, multiply it by kind of an Orem standard, 1.4, and we came up with the suggested rate of 4.69 per student per bed. The next slide, then basically, okay, now, so here it is, we've broken it down, the 24-hour weekday, you can kind of see that with the AM peak factor, the PM peak factor. The consultant, I couldn't find in the documentation where any 24-hour weekday rate was provided, but you can see the AM and PM peak. And looking at that information, you can see that we were far apart. The consultant did base his recommendation upon the study from six locations, 2 student housing projects in Orem, 3 in Provo, 1 in Logan. One of the things that after we talked with city staff at Provo, after we talked with, we had a joint council meeting with the Orem City Council members and Provo City Council members. One of the things that we found out from Provo is that because of the parking problems they have there, students park many blocks away. So when you do a study and you look at people who are coming out of the door of the apartment complex and they're walking away, you know, you don't count them as getting in a vehicle. You only count the people who get in a vehicle on site or on a nearby street where you can see them actually within sight distance of getting into a vehicle. So I think that's one of the reasons why, again, Provo has decided to go to a 0.8 parking ratio because of the parking problems that they've experienced and students that park many blocks away. Part of the problem too that we found out from them is that for many years they didn't quite understand that they're, you know, why are they doing this? Because there's so much parking on site. Part of the problem that the Provo staff explained to us was that if some of the students they found are charged extra, you know, a certain rate for the apartment and then an extra rate for a parking space, in Utah, a lot of people don't like to pay for parking. They think it should be free, even if they have to walk blocks away to be able to get to it. So the next slide shows that with this first phase, there are a proposal of 1,132 beds. So city staff believes that over a 24-hour weekday, there'll be just a little over 5,300 vehicle trips a day. What that means is half of that is exiting the site and half of that would be coming back into the site. And you can see the breakdown for AM and PM peak hours. The next slide shows also how the traffic study was made in January, and you can see from this chart, this was some information taken from I-15 just south of campus, which is actually reflected quite often throughout the community. People just drive less in January for many different reasons. I think one is the weather, another is, they may be broke after Christmas, can't fill up the gas tank as much. Anyway, for many different reasons, January is a low month. Next slide. UVU last year did a traffic study on campus, and part of what they did was they had their consultant analyze queuing at different intersections because, the campus has gone through kind of an extensive process to see how the campus is going to grow and develop and build more buildings and bring more students on campus. And they wanted to take a look at the queuing problems that they were having, see what kind of transportation improvements they could make, how they might be able to embrace transit and other things, and plan for the future. So the next slide shows what I've done is the upper photo. This is 960 South on it. I just zoomed into that area from the campus study, and that's 960 South. On the right side is where it connects to 400 East. The junior high school is across the street. And you can kind of see that in their PM peak, the traffic backed up almost to where that curve is in the street, you can see. But the first traffic study, and I have both of those in front of me. This is the first one. This is the second one. The first traffic study basically said, okay, even without this project being built, which is the background condition, by 2040, this is what the queuing you're going to have in the morning and evening peak hours. Of course, looking at that, it didn't pass the smell test. It's kind of like, okay, you need to, not only were your counts made in January at a low time, but your model needs to be calibrated. It needs to, your model really doesn't mean anything unless it's calibrated to real world conditions. So the next slide is from the second study, and even without the project there, the background conditions in 2040, you can see that it pretty much goes to the same location as it did last year. And because of the growth of the campus that's expected, that's part of the reason why we're still not on the same page. Next slide shows 960 South Street. In working with the campus, they and staff in reviewing the information that was provided from their consultant last year and reviewing the information from this consultant, I'm going to read the text from findings and key recommendations. 960 South, 400 West, the intersection is currently operating at level of service E. Not in the future, currently. So in January, the intersection is a level of service E. Well, what does level of service E means? Level of service ranges between A and F. F is a failure condition. E is saturation. A is, that means you live out in the country with a bunch of cows surrounding you. So, and it also recommends the intersection should be signalized when warrants are met. Another intersection I just wanted to point out while I've got this open, Wolverine Way and College Drive. It's anticipated that that's going to be a level of service F in 2040, even if this project is not built. Why do we care about that intersection? Because typically when a location has traffic failure conditions, you don't want to use that route. You want to find a different route. One of the things too that I wanted this was the first slide too, where we're trying to work through a development agreement, and one of the things we need to do is not only have the developer widen a part of 960 South to help mitigate the problems and the queuing that's happened, but also contribute to a future traffic signal. And of course, what you can see here too is on the north end of this proposed project, you can kind of see a little bit of a grid network street system, if you will. It's not a development that's just, has one intersection connection to a main street. They're connected to 960 South, which connects to streets both east and west. They also have a connection through 1000 South. And the next slide shows how we also need to have a connection from Palos Verde Drive to the south to Wolverine Way and go across the campus parking lot and get an access easement and construction easement and all of that. So again, we're distributing traffic. We're not funneling it to just one or two locations. We're trying to disperse it so that we can handle traffic better. The next slide. Also, the campus, my understanding, the requirement, part of their negotiation is they're going to require the developer to have a pedestrian underpass. And the city from the very beginning, even when we recommended 0.8 parking on site, recommended a bike share program. That's where you have a certain number of bikes on the site where you can go show your your residency card or whatever and be able to check the bike out and then be able to either drive to campus or Walmart or wherever. And then also have a bus shuttle van system where it would be able to take some of the residents who do not have cars to shopping and to other things like that. Let's see, is there another slide? Yeah, the 0.8 parking spaces per bed. We can skip that one for now. Let's go to the next slide. And in case anybody has any questions about what are the traffic levels kind of historically or what's out there a few years ago, there's some traffic information that we can come back to if we need to. And is there another one or is that the last one?
Last one.
Last one, yes. The developer is currently in the process of getting several agreements worked out with UVU. This just happened to be the two reasons I'm showing this. Again, this shows all of the how the traffic can disperse, how the traffic and the pedestrians can disperse to different locations. But this was an attachment in one of the agreements that would get access easements through to these different locations. One of the concerns we had, of course, was this Exhibit C had underneath Exhibit C, it was crossed out, and there in red it said to be revised. And don't know what to be revised means, but this is a plan that we've been working on for a long time, and it would be nice to be able to work out those to be revised conditions. That's it.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Stroud or Mr. Goodrich?
So we're still waiting on approvals from UVU. There's a conflict with the traffic studies.
Yeah, I think we can resolve that conflict with the traffic studies. UVU is in agreement that 960 North needs to be widened. I think the developer also sees the need for that. I think part of what they're doing is they're in negotiations for what kind of a cost share is there going to be for doing that. You know, UVU is creating some of the need. Also, you know, how much are each one of them going to pay for the traffic signal? I think part of that in our discussions with UVU officials, they're still in that negotiation process of what is a proportionate share.
So currently, there are no agreements between UVU and the developer?
There is a letter of intent that describes what kind of agreements that they're working towards. However, I think the key part to the letter of intent, and let me just read this last section. The parties acknowledge and understand that this is a non-binding letter of intent. The parties will continue to negotiate the terms of the following agreement, recognizing that all agreements will need to be executed before project approval by the Orem City Council. So that's what we're waiting for. We want to put together a development agreement, and we really can't put our development agreement together until we see the signed agreements between the developer and UVU. So I think we're all on the same page about what needs to be done. Now it's just who does what and what kind of cost share is there.
It kind of begs the question of why we're discussing it this evening at Planning Commission meeting. Steve?
I'll make sure the chair recognizes me here, if that's okay.
Yes, Steve.
You know, these agreements that we're talking about between the developer and UVU are necessary for the success of the project, for the development of the project. But I think those are primarily things that need to be worked out between staff and the developer. I think for your purposes, you don't really necessarily need to be concerned with them for purposes of your review. I mean, except to the extent that whatever you do essentially is going to be necessarily contingent upon them getting, you know, these agreements executed. Because no matter what you do, if they don't get these agreements executed, the project is not going to fly. But I think for purposes of your discussion here, what you need to look at is just to evaluate the project on its own merits. Decide if it makes sense. Decide if it's in the best interest of the city. If it's a good project, you know, taking into account the attributes that the developer, I'm sure, will describe to you, and the positive impacts for UVU, you know, for students, and also taking into account concerns of the residents who live there and what impact the project might have on them. So I guess my advice to you would be not to worry so much about those agreements. That'll get worked out. If it doesn't, then it'll sort of all be for naught anyway. So hopefully that'll help to narrow the scope of what you need to focus on this evening.
I have a question for Paul. So 5,309 trip generations in a 24-hour workday. That's a lot, just looking at the number. What, in like comparison to maybe real-world experience for us, what does that look like when you put that much more, you know, in a neighborhood?
Dave, can you go to the... Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this because, like, I agree with Steve. I think we're close to negotiating. Yes, the signal is going to go in, and instead of just saying we'll determine what our proportionate share is sometime in the future, we're going to determine what that is and have it spelled out in the agreement. Let's see, go to the slide. I think it was the last slide, Dave. Yeah, I'm sorry, second to last. It's the one before that. You can kind of see back in 2009 around the 800 South and 400 West intersection. You can see now each one of those numbers kind of on each leg of those intersection, that was the two-way traffic. So you can kind of, I don't know if that helps you, but for instance, the 5,168 on the south leg, that kind of is how much is going to be generated. That's what staff thinks could, by the very limited information that we have, We hope that it's less than that, but I don't think we can, yeah. Anyway, that's one of the reasons why we need to distribute traffic to multiple locations and not just one. Now, if all of that traffic was coming out of 960 South on 400 West, again, it's already currently at level of service E, saturation conditions, and we can't put that much more traffic on that street. So, but if we split it up, staff feels very confident that we are going to be able to handle the additional traffic if we split it up. One of the things that I did not mention, the roundabout that's further to the south there on 4th West and 12th South, we have some federal funds to widen that roundabout, make it much larger, increase the capacity. And again, one of the locations where this development would tie to is, again, to the south, to that fifth leg of the roundabout that would go to that intersection. So again, like Steve says, we don't want you to worry about these kind of things. We feel very confident that we worked this out with the campus, and we've got our minds wrapped around this. And now I think you need to look at, is this something that would benefit the community in the area?
Thank you. The reason I asked you is wasn't to nail you down to specifics, but because I'm pretty sure that it's going to come up in the public comment. Second of all, is I wasn't listening right. I guess I didn't hear that. I like hearing that you're saying we can work it out. We just can't dump them all into 960.
Yeah.
That helps me understand that
And
it's workable in the traffic world. It just not on 960.
And this is kind of a standard that we need to set as our recommendation, is that when we have big projects, whether it's student housing next to the campus or whether it's a big project somewhere else, you don't just have one access. You try to distribute traffic and kind of replicate the grid network that we have already developed in the city over, as long as Orem's been around.
Are there other questions? I'm sure the applicant is present. Would you like to come forward and make comments? Tell us who you are.
Yes, Cameron Gunter with PEG Development. If I can, I'll make a brief presentation, and then I'd like UVU, Cameron Martin, to stand up and talk about UVU's role in it, and then I'd like to have my project manager talk a little bit more about the specifics of the project, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes.
We're a development company here in Utah County, in Provo. We've done one project in Orem. I've done several projects in Utah County, but one in Orem, the Sienna Villas. It's on the old United Steelworkers property. And so we're involved with UVU from a significant friend part, where we're very supportive of the university. And because of that, we had been a little bit involved with some of the master planning of the university, and had seen what had been going on. And we were approached by some at the university asking us if we had any interest in trying to put a student housing project together, because one of their primary survey items with their students was there's the campus housing, or there's the student housing on campus just was not there, and they would like to have that something on campus versus across the interstate, and something much closer. And so as we started looking at different options, knowing what some of the other developers had done, we said we would go and try to make a run at it. And so we did. It was last May, April, May time, that we started working on this project. We met with the homeowners and tried to make it as painless as possible, and understanding that it wasn't going to be painless, and some of it would be more difficult than others. But we were able to, in a couple-month period, assemble a majority of the property. And we told most of the homeowners that we don't want to drag you out for a long time, so we'll make a fairly short fuse. And if we have what we said is more than 60 to 70% of the homeowners that are willing to sell the property to us, and we'll go ahead and close, so it's not going to drag them out. Since then, through the last year, we have closed on all of them but one property that we're working on right now, and we'll continue to work with them and try to see if we can acquire that property and get to where we can both work it out. So in the meantime, if they want to stay, and then we're fine. We'll try to do our best. I know that we've struggled a little bit with leaving them there and doing what we've done. We will try to make a commitment if they want to stay to make it better for them, with the understanding that we've certainly have dropped the ball on a few things. So we're still encouraged that we could potentially work something out, but if not, we'll try to make it the best we can for them, understanding that everything may not work out exactly the way it is. So one of the things that we like about this project, and that we think it's a benefit to UVU and us, it is right on campus. And with the university the size that UVU is, and not having on-campus housing, even though we're a private venture, we're still trying to work with the university to create an environment that will create that student housing feel for the students, the new incoming students and sophomores, and whoever wants to have that experience as a student at UVU, with as large as the university is growing, and it continues to grow. We are working the university, and I'll have Cam Martin talk about that. The real issue is, and this is a little bit our fault for not understanding the complete process that we had to go through to be able to have the public hearing, is the AG's office is reviewing the agreements now and the easements. But we have the verbal commitments from them, and Cam can stand up and talk about that. So we will get those in place. It's just timing with the AG's office, and with school getting out and everything falling in that time frame. So look, we appreciate the opportunity to present the zoning. We have partnered with the Woodbury's, Woodbury Corporation. Taylor and Mac are here as well. But once again, we appreciate this. We understand this is going to be a hard decision for everybody. We will try to do what we can, and I hope the staff has felt the same way. I think we'll work, as Paul has said, that we'll work through the traffic issues. I think what it boils down to is, we all agree, we understand the light has to go in, right? And I think that when it boils down to it, that's what the traffic study is going to show is look, who pays for it, and ultimately it's going to probably end up being some agreement between us and the university. Well, we know it's going to be between us and the university, and we'll work that out. So, it's the impact is lessened from that standpoint. So, having said that, if I can, Mr. Chair, if I can let Cameron Martin from university speak.
Please.
Good evening. I'm Cameron Martin. I'm Vice President for University Relations at Utah Valley University. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your processes that you go through to ensure good things happen for our community to build it. I'd like to note that as an institution, yes, we are supportive of this project. And as talked about earlier, the easement issues are in the works. During the meeting, texted some of our folks to see what the ETA, we could have that by the end of this week, possibly. It's just going through that, as you can appreciate, the public process and a thinly staffed AG's office that we have to work with. So yes, we are in support of the project. And also as evidenced by that, I think if you're welcome to go to our website off UVU/University Relations. You can find the master planning process and maps that we've gone through over the last year and a half, actually started even 2.5 years ago. And then we had a pause just to do some academic planning to be in sync with the facilities master planning. We've convened over 40 meetings and met with thousands of people. Many of that thousands have been repeat individuals. We acknowledge and do adamantly support and like our neighbors. We would like our neighbors, but we are also a reflection of that neighborhood as an institution. As our communities continue to grow, so does the demand on us to provide opportunity for our students. And part of that is a housing component. UVU does not own any housing. That helps us keep the price point of our tuition low for better access. This particular project, when it initially, UVU surrounded it on 3 sides. Given a recent purchase this last year of some homes on the east side of Palos Verdes, UVU basically surrounds this. And so it does make sense to us, and in our master planning process, had a placeholder for this and other potential sites which we foresee making good options for student housing, contiguous to campus, to create an environment where students can have a cohorted experience. The more they are connected in a place to live, learn, work, and play, the better we are in retaining and completing them, graduating them to build our economy and meet the talent force needs of our area. I also would like to point out that we are trying to be sensitive to the needs and the interests of neighbors. We have, in those 40 plus meetings we've had, some have voiced real concern with our methodology and how we anticipate growing, and particularly with some of the housing as it butt ups against the neighborhood. Well, we are trying to be sensitive to that, but in balance with the mandate we have by the state and to meet the needs of not only your children, my children, and grandchildren and colleagues that are trying to improve their lives through education. And trying to find that balance is a tricky one. So there are points where we'll have to agree to disagree. So we mean no malice or no offense to neighbors as we look at developments like this and say, yes, we do support because it does help us in fulfilling our state mandate. I don't know if you have other questions based upon the list that you had of what UVU is partnering with PEG to complete in consult with Orem City to meet those expectations. We are proactively doing that, working through that list. So you can understand in good faith we are encouraged and hopeful about this project. I'm interested in answering any questions, should you have any, or I can stay to the end of the discussion, come back and answer any questions you may have.
Why don't we proceed with what you have to present, and then we'll respond to questions.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Hello, Commission and Chair. My name is Kyle Jardine. I am the project manager for PEG Development, overseeing this project with the Woodbury Corporation. And I've been working very closely with staff and legal to coordinate everything that needs to be done. This is a complicated and unique project, and we appreciate your consideration, your time, your effort, and your overall looking at the big picture and the well-being for the city, the community, UVU, the students and future students of the project. So I think in general, everything has been covered very, very well. So I appreciate that. I don't want to take more time than is needed. I would just like to highlight a little bit about the project, maybe ambiance and features and that side of things. So if you keep going. This is just the properties. So I'll just stay here for a second. So if you, on the site plan here, this kind of gives you a depiction in color of what the proposed site is. The red boxes there are amenity spaces. So those pinkish red boxes. Our goal is to create a very unique and attractive property that will attract students to UVU from all over. We have spent a lot of time researching other states and universities on-campus housing as well as on-campus housing, the trends in the market of housing in general. and want to make sure that we have that captured. So this will be an attractive place and location to live. So in some of those amenities, we'll have fitness, we will have a pool, we will have a hot tub, all of within city ordinances and guidelines. We'll have a flex space there in the middle courtyard that will be allowed to be used for a variety of different things. We are recognizing that there's a high LDS population in this area, and so we need to make sure we have spaces for capacity for those LDS activities. So we are addressing that. And then the blue spaces there that are facing Campus Drive on the corner of 960 and Campus Drive are potential flex retail spaces for things such as a soda shop or a coffee shop or a small grocer for convenience store type item for students to be able to decrease their traffic by going to other stores and can just grab their necessity items there. There's also a large amenity space in between each of these courtyards, which will help to condense the noise in these courtyards and focus in these courtyards as for activities such as gatherings, ping pong, outdoor fitness activities, pool, barbecues, cooking, all of those types of items that will hope can condense those in and put a lot of the sound towards the campus rather than to the neighborhood. That's why the fingered approach of the design. As you can see, there are some difficulties and site constraints, and we've spent a lot of different iterations in design to help keep that public road and try to keep as much of the activity away from the remaining homeowner and the community, but still being able to accomplish a successful long-term project as well. Everything else in the information has been covered. If you want to go traffic study, just wanted to recognize that, yes, we have had lots of discussion and about the differences in the traffic study and the parking study. We did do a parking study of all projects that were located directly adjacent to campus, very similar to this, without neighborhoods around it. I think that's something that's unique about this project. It's like Cameron Martin mentioned, is that it is surrounded by university property. Yes, there is a neighborhood to the southeast, but it is a distance away. So we think that will be a large benefit, not having community public streets right next to the project that would cause that disturbance in parking. Our parking averages that we did find were an average of 0.66 of all of these locations that are right adjacent to campus, the highest being 0.69 and the lowest being at 0.46. That parking study has been provided to the city, and you can see the details of that. Next slide, please. These are just a typical unit that we are proposing. This will be a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom unit. The trend in student housing is privacy. That is a very, very large trend in student housing, and this would be one of the first in the market to do something like this, where you have a private bathroom and a private bedroom for majority of the students. There are other unit types, but this would be the majority of the unit type. They're very small rooms, but they do have that privacy and allow for the private dealings of the students and not having to share. This is just another one of the corner units, which would have private bedrooms but shared bathrooms. You can go to the next. Some of the odd-shaped areas will have a studio unit, which would be completely private, but those will also be limited to the single occupancy, as we've discussed. Continue on. We've gone through the elevations, so we don't need to spend time on this or the materials, unless there are any questions. But just in conclusion, like has been mentioned, the recommendation is that there's a light to be installed and at 960 South and 400 West, and that also there is widening of one additional lane at 960 South. We will and are working with the university to accommodate all of these recommendations, like has been stated. The parking study, staff has recommended that we have a 0.8 stalls per bed, and we agreed to provide that 0.8 on site, even though we do not feel that it is needed. We have agreed to do so, even though it will be a large cost to the project. And then easements, we are currently securing those. I've been coordinating those with the AG is Attorney General's office, for anybody else that didn't get that acronym. The Attorney General's office is conducting it due to UVU being a state organization, that the state legal office is handling a lot of these agreements, which does take a lot longer. So I think that's everything, and we'll go to questions, or I'll turn the time back over to you, Chair.
Can we go to the previous slide that showed the elevations?
Yes.
Let's see. No, not go forward. It was the one right before the final bullet. Yeah, this one. So as we go west, you've got this common area between those two buildings. I'm looking at the bottom left.
Left, yeah.
Which then steps down. The retail is going to be at that lower level. Is that on the level of Campus Drive?
Correct. That is on the level of Campus Drive, so it's a very similar concept to a mixed-use development, right, with a ground floor retail, walkable retail, and then student housing above.
And so looking from the east, then, we're looking at a 4-story structure, or is it a 5-story structure?
It is a 4-story structure with a half of level underground.
So some of those apartments then are partially buried, partially underground?
This parking structure.
Oh,
not apartments.
Oh, you've got parking underneath all of the buildings then?
Not all of the buildings, just this furthermost west building.
Okay.
Has one level of parking underneath, behind the retail, if that helps you.
Okay, so there is parking besides the parking structure to the east?
Correct. There's 256 surface stalls,
right.
As well as the 197 roughly stalls underneath this west building, which is from that furthermost south retail portion, that entire building.
Okay, thank you. Other questions to any of the applicant team? Okay.
I do have a question. One of the things that I've read about a lot was that you were going to do some type of screening on the parking garage.
Yeah,
What?
I'm going to turn to the elevation.
What would that be? What would that involve?
So this is just an artistic rendition, right? It's not perfect to see, but it would likely be a perforated metal panel that had some kind of a color to it, so it would make it not look like a concrete structure, and preferably in the natural colors of the trees. On 960 South, there are a lot of large trees, pine trees specifically on that, and all of those will remain and screen the majority of the parking structure from your view to the south on 400 West. And then on the 400 West side, we would actually do a green screen, which would be plant growth on the parking structure itself.
On the building?
On the parking structure, yes. There would basically be like a trellis that would allow for plant growth in that trellis to shield that entire 400 West side of the parking structure.
And the parking structure is how many stories?
Four stories with a half level underground.
That's a lot of screening.
It is. But luckily, those trees are very mature already that are there on the site, and are going to remain. So that is, majority of it will be already screened by those, and this will be just behind it to help soften the whole structure.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one, rather than doing the screen, can you have like a movie screen on there so you can put, trying to think ahead so that the neighbors can enjoy.
Yeah, blind everybody with the bright screens. No, we would prefer not to do so.
Just wondering.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is a public hearing, and I'd like to just make a few comments that I made at the beginning of the meeting, some ground rules, if you will, for the public hearing. We are anxious to hear your comments, and we would ask that those comments be limited to 3 minutes. You're not able to give your 3 minutes to someone else who wants to speak longer. Each person just gets 3 minutes. Try not to repeat comments. We want to hear as many thoughts and ideas as possible, but if we all have the same comment, if we can attempt not to repeat those as much as possible. We invite everyone to be respectful to each other and to us. We're all volunteers here. And so with that, one last reminder that this is being recorded on the city YouTube channel. So with that, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anyone who would like to come and speak to come to the microphone and state your name, please, and where you live. Let's have you give an address of where you live as well.
Hi, my name is Carol Harrison. I live at 1158 South, 350 West. So you can see I'm half a block east of 400 West. Our children have attended Lake Ridge Junior High. The main thing I want to say, well, several things. One is I think it's kind of a dangerous precedence that developers can go in and buy a neighborhood and just decide that they're going to change it into something else. I would be concerned with that happening in Orem, elsewhere in Orem. This was a beautiful neighborhood. I personally went around to several student housing that surround UVU, and the Wolverine's Crossing, which is across I-15, they have 1,200 students total, and they have about 16 acres that they have their buildings on. And they have about 800 parking stalls. And those don't really get filled up. They have a lot of outlets, like you were talking about the traffic, being able to disperse. They have a lot of outlets. They go on to very large roads, Geneva Road and the University Parkway. This is only on 8.3 acres, and they want, in the 2 phases, they want to have 1,600 students, which is a quarter or 25% even more than Wolverine's Crossings, and they have half the acreage. And the parking with the full build out would be over 1,100, I think it was 1,165 parking stalls with a 0.8 designation from the city. It's just too much for this little area. It's just too much for the acreage. Why do they need to put so many students and pack them into such a high density on this little spot? I just think that the whole concept that they have there, it's just too much. And all the people that will go out of the 2 areas going onto 960, they're not going to go left. They won't be able to go left. They'll go right, and they'll go right onto 4th West, and all the traffic will go through there. Sure, it'll be great to have passage through the parking lot going to the south, but there will be a ton of traffic, and it's right directly across the street from Lake Ridge Junior High, which will be a very big safety issue for our students at Lake Ridge Junior High. The big thing for me is just the density. I don't know why they wanted to pack so many students in there. If they lowered everything a lot and the cars would go down, it would be a lot better. The other point was that I understand that they changed that it's not exclusively for students. They want to put other people in there. And so if they're not exclusively students, they're going to be a lot more trips in their cars. If it's people that are just working, it'll increase the traffic even more. I have a paper that I would like to give to you so that you can see the things that the numbers.
Okay. You.
I'm Roger Harrison, and I live at the same house. And this man here should get a raise. Because, yeah, let me tell you what it means. It means he said there's going to be 600 more cars coming out of that place when our kids are coming out of school. That's what it means. And they're either going to go on to 4th West or they're going to go on Wolverine Way. And the shorter, most direct route is 4th West. So when our kids are going to Lake Ridge, there's 600 more cars. That's the traffic study. And the study these guys had said 10%. They said like 90 cars, which was ridiculous. And that's exactly what he pointed out. So there's one thing. The other thing, like my wife just said, this is not student housing, folks. This is apartments. So don't let them give you the blind side of student housing. This is apartments. Anybody can rent. Anybody can go in there. And what that means is these students, or whoever's going to be in there, they're going to go over to Lake Ridge, aren't they? And we as citizens and kids who go to Lake Ridge, what do we care about? 1,600 people feeling where? They go to the field on Lake Ridge. They go do their things on Lake Ridge. They drink their beer at Lake Ridge. They do whatever they want. They sell their drugs, whatever. We feel a safety of 1,600 people being plopped down into less than 10 acres. That's a concern for us, right? A big one. Also, it was interesting. I've met with some of these Woodbury, and I appreciate Cameron coming, but Cameron didn't tell you the whole story. UVU is invested in PEG. They have money in PEG, okay, this project. And UVU's foundation board, 2 of them are here, Gunter and Woodbury. They sit on the board who says we should buy the Washburn homes for $1.8 million or whatever, okay? We should develop PEG. This foundation, UVU foundation board are right here. So we're talking about conflict of interest. When they tell you, UVU tells you or whatever, oh, this is great, it's going to be the best thing, we'll realize that the board members are right here in this project. So this is not just about student housing, as you well know. This is about money. It's about money. Now, so all the way back to the traffic, 600 more cars coming into Lake Ridge. You put a light, what happens? You just back up. Parents who try to bring in their kids to Lake Ridge can't. Kids who are leaving Lake Ridge can't leave. We can't get there, they can't get there, and it all is no good. So I don't care where you put them, Mr. Goodrich, even though I appreciate your study, I don't think you can disperse, 500 more cars in the morning, 600 and so more cars in the afternoon if you don't have new roads that go somewhere else. By the way, thank you very much for all you do. I know it's volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. My name is Mark Tibbetts. I live on 876 South, 725 West in Orem. Just a little bit of history. I built Palos Verdes Estates in the 1970s. As odd as this may seem, we actually used the closeness of the university as a selling factor for the homes. And at that time, and even still today, these nice pine trees and large grass areas exist, and it gave the perception that it was a nice park area. So now, a few years later, we have a corporation that's come in and bought out all those homes to put this development in. I think what we've learned today from Paul is that the traffic studies are inadequate. And what Orem City has is not current. 960 South, if you were to drive there, that dumps right into the entrance for Lake Ridge Junior High. It's right across the street. So mom and dad are pulling in there to drop their kids off or picking them up in the afternoon. And if you were to go there in the afternoon and you were to want to go and turn north from 960 and turn north and go to 800 South, you would wait the longest time. I think that it would only be reasonable for the Planning Commission to require the developer to not proceed with this project until a current traffic study with current traffic counts is done.
You can't just go on what is being surmised. Also, you have to take into consideration the safety of the students that go to Lake Ridge Junior High. Many of them walk on 400 South. The increase in traffic would be completely dangerous. It would be bad for us as citizens to allow this to happen. And until you can take the time to go out there and see what is really happening, this project should be put on hold until you can go and see exactly what the issues are. The other issue is Orem City needs to stop allowing developers to buy property in residential areas to build apartments. This is a residential area. It doesn't border State Street. It doesn't border Geneva. These are homes. These are where people built their families. And now you're letting these companies go in and buy our homes and destroy our neighborhoods.
My name is Ron Dyer. Our residence is 385 West, 1060 South. One house away from 400 West, just catty corner from the 960 and 1000 South. We've been property owners, homeowners there for 37 years, and we paid property taxes all that time. We've had a great and quiet family area. If I understand your zoning correctly, R4, R8 is just ideal for families. But look what's happening. You're jumping from an R8 to a PD 48 in one jump. It's a negative effect on our neighborhood, our quality of life. I think it's a negative impact. You've talked about traffic, but the quality of life is going to be lowered. I can't see that the property value would go up as a family residential area that close to student housing and the traffic that there is. So I oppose it, and I would humbly submit and request that you consider the impact, the negative impact it'll have on our neighborhood. Not everyone's here. Got a neighbor across the street that definitely would be here, but he's been sick, Alan Parrish. He lives right on 400 West. Phil Snellgrove right next to him. And everyone on 400 West, how they could even get out of their driveways. They have to back out of their drive. It's just too much. I really question that UVU should be 75,000 students or whatever they want to grow to. Why not just establish another university in another area like Lehigh and not put such a negative impact on us? So anyway, I'd humbly submit this idea that you consider the negative impact on the longtime residents. Many of us, the equity that we have in our home is our investment in life. And so it's a worry to see what will happen when all of a sudden you can see 4 and 5 stories, apartments, and all of that traffic and all of that parking over there. How can it be considered a great and ideal place for families? When we moved there, it was ideal. Lake Ridge Junior High, or Mountain Ridge High School, the grade school, and UVU is just walking distance. But it's a real doubt to me, in my mind anymore, that we would retain our value as a family resident area. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jan Collard. I owned horse property on the corner of 1000 South and 4th West that is now going to be a 4-story parking structure. I was kind of hoping that this wasn't going to go through, but from the sounds of everything that's going on, it's just a matter of the, what would you say, the I's dotted and the T's crossed. While I got a very good price for my property, I worked 40 years for that property. It wasn't given to me. It was for my retirement, and I'm going to try not to cry because I'm very passionate about this neighborhood. I lived across the street from the neighborhood for about 15 years before I lived at this house for 26 years. I'm really upset at the way the city has allowed the developer to come in and trash our neighborhood. I'm sorry to say at the present moment that with the houses torn down, it actually looks better than it has for the last year, because we were told the lawns would be kept up. They were not. They stripped the houses. The houses sat there empty. You can look through the police reports and find out all the drug issues that we had, all the vagrant issues we had, and everything else. My question is how does a developer turn around and spend multi-million dollars without somebody promising this is going to go through? I honestly believe that the state bought the Melville property to isolate our property to make it easier for the developer to come in and take our property. Like I said, I honestly think this is probably a done deal, but I ask you guys to look at this with open eyes. Look at the whole project. I realize this is on the campus to the east side. When UVU or Trade Tech bought that property, it was landlocked in the first place. You have apartments to the south. You've got apartments to the west. You've got them on the other side of the freeway. I fail to see why they need to turn around and put the apartments in our neighborhood. And you know, with the traffic study, you aren't taking into effect all the people in the neighborhood that have the cars and stuff that's going to be driving coming up. That's only going to impact the study. I don't know. I just think that as far as the traffic study, you know, you cut through the parking lot, they're still going to come out on 4th West. 960 has nothing to do with it. All that traffic is 400 West. You guys need to go over there and drive through that area at certain times of the day. I'm sure that you would find that it's very hard to get in and out of the neighborhoods unless you're always turning right. As far as this roundabout spur, I fail to see why making that roundabout bigger is going to make it any better. You're still going to have them coming out of there like a pinball machine. So anyway, I ask you to turn this down.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Busaith. I am the chairman of Southwest Orem Neighborhood Association. We have an advisory board of about 38 people who have been meeting for the past year to contemplate the developments on the Steel property by ICO, the PEG development at Palos Verdes, the JRS development at Jerry Jones's property, and next it'll be the D.R. Horton proposal for the Rawlings property. We consider these neighborhoods of Southwest Orem at high risk. Did you all receive and read the May 9th letter I sent you showing our concerns for which we think this should be delayed or perhaps completely opposed? And I'd just like to say one thing tonight, because most of those concerns have already been mentioned by others, the direct neighbors. I'd like to say that 5 months ago, I mentioned to City Council in a presentation about who SWONA is that being peninsular, we could see why one might throw in the towel easily on this property. And since then, the advisors have met many times and discussed what we really think about that idea, and the concern for the junior high school and the traffic have been paramount in all of our discussions. But in addition, I want to question the underlying assumption that led to this design in the first place. It's that UVU needs more student housing. I want to submit to you that there are things in the works that are going to change the equation dramatically, and you don't have to pass this. It's worth at least postponing it and long enough to let some of this play out and decide whether we need this housing there or not. given the impact on the junior high school, let it wait until we can figure out whether it's really going to be needed or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mary Rowley. I live at 1159 South 300 West. And there are, well, thank you for letting us have this opportunity to talk to you. I hope that you will think about how you would feel if you lived in our neighborhood. I am a student at UVU. I know I'm older than most of them, but I go down there, and I hope to be able to someday graduate from there. And I love the school. I mostly go in the evening. The school is so big now that they have a lot of adjunct professors, and I like that. They're great teachers, but they aren't invested in UVU. And if they need to go somewhere, class is canceled. I've sent some letters to UVU. They just kind of pass them, and so I get no response from them. But it's a concern that they are growing too fast and haven't got themselves able to keep up with the students that they already have, let alone grow so large. Besides all that, my time's going to run out. You've got the dedicated bus line, which I really don't think we needed. We could have just dedicated a bus to do that same thing, but that line is supposed to bring people from the area to UVU so that they don't have to drive and so that they don't have to live right on campus. Even when you live right on campus, you still have to go places. And if you want to check something, try BYU. I know it's their actual on-campus thing, but it's kind of the same concept as UVU is trying to do here. They thought, well, these kids don't need cars, so we're not going to have parking for them. And they have about the same as that would be. And they're wrong. If you have a car, you will bring it with you. You might not use it all the time, so we'll just sit there and need a parking space. One other thing is, since we've got that dedicated bus line, and since UVU has expanded already, and some of their programs are on the other side of the freeway, let's have that on-campus housing down there where there's room to have it instead of destroying beautiful yards. That just makes me, as I walked by there the other day, I thought, how wasteful has this society become that you can just tear down a beautiful neighborhood to jack up a bunch of apartments in a place that they don't need to be. So I hope you'll just think about that. I know these guys are big businesses. They make beautiful buildings. You've let them rebuild them all again, and I don't go there. I don't like it. But I know a lot of people do. And I know you're trying to make this a great city for many people. I hope you will consider those that have been here a long time and like to have it here for a long time and want to live here. But we might have to also move out and leave it as a city of 20-year-olds if that's the way things are going to go. And that makes me really sad. So I hope you'll think about it from your own perspective and what you would feel like if you lived in this neighborhood. And realize there's room for growth, but it doesn't have to be right there. No.
Thank you.
My name is Brad Woods. I live at 466 West, 800 South. I have a daughter who walks to school at Lake Ridge every day during the school year, and soon I'll have a son who's walking to school there as well. And she is on a regular basis nearly hit trying to cross the street to get to Lake Ridge. Adding more cars is just going to make that problem worse, and it's an accident waiting to happen. So I feel very concerned about that. Also, the city is currently undergoing neighborhood planning processes. Our neighborhood hasn't had the benefit of that. So we haven't had an opportunity to decide, is this the right place for that type of use? From a neighborhood perspective, we haven't decided how we want to grow. I object to UVU doing the planning for Orem City. They say this is where we want to grow, but what about us? What about the residents of Orem City? Why don't we have a say in where we want to grow and where we want to put housing? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jose Silva. I live on 1252 South, 490 West, and that's why I walk around with a bullseye on my forehead, because I believe that's probably the next place that UVU. It's not the first time. This won't be the first time that we've been approached by other companies and trying to buy our neighborhood. In fact, UVU right now currently owns the old Murdoch place, which is now the Alumni House, right behind our home, and the three homes on the two on the corner, and then one inside in our neighborhood. So I think it's only a matter of time that before that neighborhood also is going to. But now we're just basically an island because now UVU has taken up everything else. But my biggest concern is when I moved here to go to law school at BYU, we purchased that home. I raised my children in that home. My youngest daughter is now 17, but they went initially to Vineyard Elementary School, which now belongs to UVU. And so then they had to go to Westmore Elementary School, which is just right up the street from that roundabout. This isn't just going to be student housing, just like the apartments just south of where I live, I guess it's west of where we live down the hill, is not student housing. And I'm amazed when we lived, when my children were young enough to still have to walk to Westmore, I didn't let them walk to Westmore. They have to cross that roundabout. There are not crossing guards there at that roundabout. And the students are just coming in. And so they weren't able even to walk 2 blocks to their elementary school. I would have to drive them. And then having to wait for the continual nonstop through that roundabout, which is way too small for the 5 outlets that it has. And then when my children got older, taking them to Lake Ridge, which is a block away, and yet I didn't let them walk there either because of the traffic. And now we want to increase the traffic so much. I really fear for the children who live in the apartments because I see them walking, trying to get past that roundabout as they come up the hill, up to Westmore. And I don't think anybody's, and they're not even here because I think those apartments are just outside that circle of notification. But those are not just student housing, there's families there, young families. They're in our ward and their children come up to Westmore. And that's a big issue, safety issue as well. Even now when my daughters got older and I'd have to take them to Mountain View, I have to go up 400 North. I stopped doing that and I go back out down University Parkway, take the highway up to Center Street to take them to Mountain View because that's quicker than going up 400. Because of the traffic in the morning when the students are coming through. And that's not even including the times when there's events at UVU, which even become more ridiculous. And talking about rerouting the flow, if this project was to be done, if it's going to be anything like what they did with the apartments down the hill, which is the way they rerouted that is ridiculous. There's an accident there waiting to happen and people go the wrong way. I just think the safety issue is paramount here for people who live in that community.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Roberts, and I live in the remaining house that has not been purchased. And I just also want to speak to about the safety concerns. I have 2 children that go to Lake Ridge. They would not only have to cross the crosswalk on 400 West, but also 960. I agree with the traffic flow is a huge problem. A light there may be needed, but it also creates additional concerns with backup. 1000 South will remain if we don't sell our house and we remain. I won't ever be able to take a left out. I will always have to take a right because the cars will back up. I also want to address the safety of my children. If we choose to stay in that home, we're surrounded in parking lot and road. And I have 8 children, my youngest being 6. This is where they play. This was their neighborhood from the time they were born, most of them anyway. There's access right to the east of my home with traffic flow. There's traffic right in front of my home. It's not a true cul-de-sac. It's not a dead end. It goes out to a private road, which allows access to flow freely right past my house. I also would ask you to put this project on hold until it's done right, until things are squared away with UVU, until they have plans that are not preliminary, until they have all of the homes purchased. And until they have the safety of the school, the students at Lake Ridge, and the surrounding neighborhoods addressed. This is a very preliminary project that has many issues. I'm not opposed to the project, but I'm opposed to it doing it Jimmy rigged, and it's Jimmy rigged right now. It could be done better, and I propose that it be put on hold until it's done right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others that would like to make comment?
My name's Reese Christensen. I live on the corner of 400 South, 800 West in Orem. I also work down at UVU. I use that entrance and exit to UVU quite a bit, and it's easy to get in there. It's terrible to get out of there. Sometimes going east on 950 South, I have to take a right-hand turn, go down the street, and make a U-turn to get going north on 400 West in order to get back to my home. My home sits on the corner. Sometimes I wait 4 to 5 minutes to get out of my driveway, which is just ridiculous. I've been almost killed 2 or 3 times trying to get out of that driveway because of the traffic. I could probably give you a traffic study. Since I sit on that corner and I sit on that porch and watch the traffic go by there, it's already too much traffic. I watch these kids coming home from junior high school, walking north on 400 West, trying to cross the street, either at the crossing at Lake Ridge Junior High School or at the intersection of 400 South and 800 South, 400 West. And it scares me to death sometimes to see these kids trying to get out of the school property. I don't think it's a good idea. I think we've had enough traffic down there. Even lately with the high school graduations that have gone on every year, every high school in the county uses UVU for their high school graduations. And just the last 2 weeks, the traffic has been horrendous down in that area. I can't even imagine what it would be like adding the cars and the traffic that we're thinking about right now. But I'd be glad to help you with that traffic survey. I can sit on my porch and count. I've done it many times, and it just boggles my mind. The traffic really increased when they put that light at that intersection, and the speed with which they go through there is crazy. I live on the northeast corner, and so any cars that have a right-of-way going westbound and want to make a right-hand turn onto 400 West come right around that corner, and it's a blind side. They don't even look right. They think because they've got a green light there, they can just take off and turn that corner without looking and seeing what's going on there. So the other problem too is I've even noticed a couple times that I have UVU students that park on the west side of my house there and up and down 4th West because they don't want to pay the parking fee that UVU wants them to pay in order to pay on campus, in order to park on campus. So I think it needs to be rethought out, and hopefully you'll take a look at that, and maybe sometime you can sit down in that Lake Ridge Junior High School parking lot and just see what's going on down there. Cars trying to pick up their kids and get out of that lot is just a nightmare. So maybe you'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Woods. I live at 709 Sunny Lane. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to all of us tonight. I appreciate it very much. We've seen a deterioration in our neighborhood over the last 35 years that I've lived there. I like UVU, and I appreciate what they've done for our community. But there reaches a tipping point, and this project, in my view, is a tipping point that just should not happen. I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing then, and thank you for all of your comments this evening. It's been good to hear from you. We'll go ahead and bring this back to the commission then for discussion.
Can somebody tell me how many properties were purchased in this 8 point whatever acres? 23 out of 24.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Maybe just to respond to a couple of the comments that were made about the city allowing developers to go in and purchase properties. The city can't stop people from buying properties. And, you know, once somebody's bought property, they can tear down the improvements if they want to. So it seems like maybe there's a misconception that the city could have done something to stop that. In fact, there's nothing the city can do. You can't stop somebody from selling their home if they want to, or somebody from buying it if they want to. So the city had nothing to do with that, obviously, and it was a developer's choice to invest the money and the seller's choice to sell their properties. So that's kind of the way the free market works.
Thank you. I was going to make that comment too, but that was a long time ago.
Well, that was actually my point. I mean, 23 parties sold their property to the developer. And yet we heard from one tonight who seems to regret it, or I'm just kind of confused, but because it seems to me like if you didn't like what was going in, you could not sell. I mean, I hope you had a choice in whether you sold or not. So that confuses me just a little bit. If you sold but you don't like what the developer's doing.
Can I say something? I realize opinions. Well, can I just say one thing? I would say no one was quote unquote forced to sell, but if you knew what went down in the neighborhood, what was our choice? If I remained where I was and I was told that they were going to use my property as a buffer zone of 400 West, which would virtually make, I don't have an acre of horse property, I have 4 improved building lots. They were going to put in high-rise apartment buildings and use my property as a buffer zone for West and make my property virtually useless. That's where half the properties ended up selling after the fact. We weren't forced to sell, but what was our choice?
Thank you. With that, we won't have any more comments, okay? We could be here all night.
And my confusion on this is that all these properties get bought with the thought by a developer that they're going to change the zoning. When there isn't, there is no guarantee.
There's no
in that.
guarantee of zoning.
There is no guarantee.
Please, don't, let's not.
Can't do that, sorry. But I just don't understand that thought process.
I look at that neighborhood and I think I've been sitting here looking at the maps of this thing. It's absolutely incredible. You got parking lots, and I think it's maintenance right across from Lake Ridge there that something UVU does there. And they're absolutely surrounded. They got the campus on the bottom side. I think if I lived in that neighborhood, I'd have been out, just for the fact of what's encroaching. I mean, that's a lot of surface parking surrounding that neighborhood. And it's sad, because I live in a little neighborhood. I live on the opposite side of 8th South, and that's something that'll probably eventually have to happen, I'm assuming. At some point, it's going to be down the road. On this side of 8th South, we've got 4 lanes, 2 lanes each way on our side of 8th South coming down. And that's just because of traffic and all the things that have gone on. And I live a half a block, maybe a full block, from Aston Place, the huge development at the mall. And I must say, I haven't had a problem with traffic over in our neighborhood. There was a lot of people quite upset about that. Couldn't stop it. It went through, and but they've been good neighbors.
But they
Actually, I had a question for legal. Can you specify that housing apartments are student only? Can that be forced legally in modern society?
That is an interesting question. We actually did that at one time for Wolverine, what used to be Parkway Crossing, but it's a Wolverine Way. I believe it was that we actually did have a student requirement on there at one time. When we originally considered that, we did some legal research to see that very question, and it seemed like the case law was a little bit mixed. Some said you could do it, and some said maybe you couldn't. So I don't know that there's a real definite legal answer to that. I haven't researched that since Parkway Crossing first came in, and I don't know if that's been 15 or more years ago, but.
Well, there's just a lot of anti-discrimination laws now.
There's
age and race and.
So that's why I say some courts, are kind of leaning towards, that's, it's not an appropriate differentiation that you can make, and others have said, yeah, it's okay. So, like I said, I haven't updated that in 15 years, so I'm not sure where the courts stand on that now.
If it was the university building it, could they have just excluded everybody but students?
Well,
if it was just the university, it was their property.
Yeah, I think they probably could.
Right, because that's what BYU did.
Yeah.
It's
on campus.
Right. And you're saying if the university owned the property.
Right.
Yeah.
So technically, right. Okay. So it's on campus, but it's not on campus.
It's surrounded by campus. And Mrs. Roberts.
Well, I just want to say that those concerns that all of you brought up, especially those who have the children going to school there, that is a real concern. And to see the traffic going, I see it, it seems like a lot. I can't imagine what it's like when school's in and out at Lake Ridge Junior High. I don't know, but I can imagine what that feels like. So your concern is heard. I know we feel that, but again, going back to anybody can sell their property. You're your own, you can do whatever you want with your property, and to see that many properties sell, 23 out of 24, it's just what growth demands.
Yeah. Welcome to America. I live up by Harmon's. And my children, of course, I'm a little older than some of you. My children all went to Canyon View and Orchard and had to cross 800 North. So I know a little bit about traffic and danger and other things along that line. Generally, it's never as bad as we imagine it's going to be. Never. My children are still alive. In fact, my son, actually, I now have 5 grandchildren from him, and he lives across the street from us after being away for a long time. But I hear your concerns. I'm so grateful for you to come out and participate in this process. I think I'll leave it at that. So we know. A lot of us have lived here a long time. And children raised, gone to school. Oh, and by the way, they all went to Orem High School and had to walk because there were no buses, so they had to cross Center Street at 400 East. So yeah, we're aware of the situation with you. And by the way, for those of you who said we need to come down there, a lot of us have been down there a long time, or a lot of times. We've seen the growth of Utah Valley State College and Utah Tech and all the other kinds of things. So we've been here. We've seen it. So we're very much aware.
I would say that I have empathy for what's happening to the neighborhood. Whenever a large entity expands and threatens neighborhoods, that concerns me. This is somewhat unique because it's totally surrounded at this point. I'm concerned that there is so much that needs to happen before this could be approved. There are a lot of permits that are needed, a lot of agreements that needed to be signed, and maybe they're close, but I would have a hard time agreeing to approve this in its present state without more assurance that things are going to come to pass. I mean, there's no guarantee that the zoning's going to change, and we don't have any authority to do that anyway. This is a recommendation from the City Council.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned with moving this forward in the present state, my personal feeling.
I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to thank the neighborhood for being so polite.
Yeah.
We don't always have this polite of an experience having the neighborhood come before us, so we really appreciate that.
Amen.
We really do. And I think what is concerning me the most right now is the traffic with the junior high kids. But you know, my kids went to Orem Junior, and kids have to cross 800 North to do that. I think the light helps a lot because that gives them a signal. Kids aren't always smart enough to use the signal. That's, you know, another thing. But anyway, that's kind of where I am concerned about the kids. I don't think it's, and I agree with Mickey that it's never quite as bad as we imagine it's going to be as far as traffic, but it's already pretty bad without imagining any additional. So.
There is that.
I've been sitting here staring at this map on my computer here.
Yeah.
And I just can't escape how many cars there are going to be on 400 West. And I just don't think I can support.
And not just the cars for me, I totally agree with that, but also that parking structure on 400 West. Who would want to be in a house and have that across the street from you? Just not good. And things could not be as bad as we imagine them until the worst happens. And then it's there. Somebody gets killed.
And that can happen whether it proceeds or not. You know, there's borrowing a jack. We're not here to base things on the merits of emotion. We're here to see whether or not it meets the ordinance and whether or not we want to either recommend or continue.
But it doesn't meet any ordinances right now. There is no ordinance.
The ordinance has been created.
Yeah, I mean to recommend
Something
the
that
project
needs
as suggested. That's all we're here for. So we have a choice.
The property's been bought. It's not like they're going to now build residential homes again.
I kept asking that question. I kept asking that question before about why all these places are bought and that's gone, but yet there is no approval. There isn't a zoning in place that would allow something else to go in. And I was told by staff that somebody else would buy it. And then what? I don't know.
That can't be part of our decision making.
No, of course.
But what can't have any effect on this.
Yeah, of course not.
If I could make a comment, maybe from my perspective, what I kind of see as your options at this point. I think obviously your job is to make a recommendation either for or against the proposed ordinance. Obviously, staff and several of you have indicated concerns about not having finalized agreements before you. So I think, and actually let me back up. I wanted to address a couple comments that were made. Also, a couple neighbors asked you to basically postpone somewhat indefinitely this proposal until we see how things develop a little bit more. That's really not an option for the city council because, you know, when somebody comes to the city with an application to rezone property, they have a right to have action taken on that proposal, whether it's to deny it or to approve it. And so it's not something that the city doesn't have the right under state law to indefinitely postpone that type of an application. If there's a concern that we're not ready to make a decision on this because we need to see how certain things unfold, then the action to take is to deny it because you're not ready to take a positive action on it. So again, as the way I see your options at this point, if you're inclined to recommend approval of this particular application, then I would suggest that you continue this item until the next Planning Commission meeting, until they have the agreement signed, everything is sort of finalized so that we know that this is really ready to go on to the City Council, because until they get things like the access worked out, the project just doesn't work. And so, it's just not functional. So it doesn't make any sense to really send it to the City Council until we know that UVU has given their consent to that. So again, if you're inclined to recommend approval of it, I would recommend making a motion to continue it to the next Planning Commission meeting, give them some time to get those documents finalized, and then you can consider it again in light of having the documents all tied up. If your inclination is to recommend denial because you feel like this is not a good project or it's not in the best interest of the city, then it probably doesn't matter if they get their agreements finalized with UVU, because probably your recommendation to deny would be the same whether they have them finalized or not, right? So in that case, then I think you could make a recommendation right now to the City Council, because it's not really dependent upon getting those documents finalized. So you don't have to follow that, but that's just kind of how I see it from my perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, you'd have to have.
Either recommendation, positive or negative, would require 4 votes.
Dad?
Anybody want to make a motion?
Well, as he just said, I think we've got one of two ways we can approach this. We can just take a heads-up vote and either send a positive recommendation or a negative to the City Council, or we can do a continuance and allow them to get the things and then relook at it. But that's two totally different approaches here, and we just kind of need to decide what we think is the best approach.
But if we send a positive recommendation and they don't get that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's dead.
It's dead.
Yeah. Well, in my understanding, it's usually best if we put it out as a positive recommendation and then vote it down, because the way it...
We can just...
I think, again, if you're inclined to make a positive recommendation, I would advise making a motion to continue to the next meeting, let them get the documents, and then take up a final action at the next meeting.
Okay. I'm for.
Should we take a vote on a negative recommendation and see where that takes us?
Or the continuance, and rehear it and get their approvals and then look at it for the...
I'm a little bit torn, because you have a piece of property there. What else are you going to do with it? But there are a lot of issues that, in my mind, the safety of the students going to the junior high is a big deal. And
Yeah, then you think about that lot. Let's say that it doesn't get approved. Is anybody really going to go in there and build residential homes? No. Oh, we need recreational park. That's right.
I think one of the issues is the density, because that's what's generating all this traffic. And so maybe that has to be addressed. If that's how you think that that's the only thing that can go in there is student housing, then maybe the density is too great.
That's something we could face with the continuance if they can even get their approvals from UVU. Would you like me to make a motion on the continuance, or?
Yeah, then it's a different project. It's
Yeah,
not a-
exactly. They'd have to come back with totally different plans.
Well, on that, yeah, we haven't even brought that up, but, I mean, let's
Well,
give this a thumbs up or thumbs down. I mean, I have no idea. I figure I can kind of tell where a few stand, but vote it on its
Paul,
where we are.
real quick on that traffic study. It was mentioned that it was an old traffic study. Is that correct? Do we have a current traffic study or?
July 2009.
You're talking about the traffic counts, is that right, on 400 West?
My presentation, I was just showing some old data that we had, and I was just letting you compare that to what we think traffic generation could possibly be for the site. In fact, it was one of the things that when we were reviewing the project as staff, our attorney said, I'm having a hard time, just like Ms. Buxton, what does 5,000 mean? And so that's why I put that historical data on there. But no, the traffic counts that the consultant did was in January of this year. And then we also had that traffic study that was done in just last year on the UVU campus. So yeah, some of the data shown on the PowerPoint presentation was old information.
I'm conflicted, but I did want to say I actually like the project. Maybe it's too dense. I don't know, but I think it's probably needed for the campus. And like this taking out, like, I don't know. No, I don't want to say that. Okay. I like the project, not sure about the density and its effect.
I'm looking at this PD 48 information. Usually one of the first things that pop up is how many per acre there's going to be, how many people. I don't see that in here at all. Is it listed and I'm not seeing it?
I don't have the code in front of me. Is on your text, is there a density?
I'm looking for it and I haven't seen anything. I've started, A was purpose. That's the beginning of it, right? Has anybody else found it? I haven't been able to find it. And so to me, that we're leaving it wide open.
Well, they'd still be tied, and the concept plan has the specific number of units and beds, so they'd still be tied to that number.
And I'm not seeing that either.
It's on the concept plan, which becomes
not part of the PD.
Which becomes part of the ordinance, and the numbers are on the concept plan.
Go. You? Cameron.
We want an answer.
Yeah, what's your density?
Yeah, answer the density.
I believe it is in your presentation, David, earlier on, but it's 37 units per 37 units per acre, and then beds per acre. That's going to be four times that, roughly.
Much.
Okay. We probably need just to make a motion and vote it up or down.
As opposed to a continuance?
No.
The motion.
Oh, one or the other. Okay.
Either, we could continue it until.
Do we have to read the whole thing to do the?
Well, Steve was saying, or I thought he was saying, that it sort of implies that we are forwarding a positive recommendation if we continue it. Otherwise, we're just stringing them along for 2 weeks, which isn't very nice.
Vote it up or down.
Yeah.
Would you like me to make him a recommendation? Let's vote.
Sure.
I'll word it. I would make a motion that we send a positive recommendation to the City Council amending Article 22-11 of the Orem City Code by enacting Section 22-11-61 PD-48 zone, amending the appendix of Orem City Code by enacting Appendix UU and amending Section 22-5-3A and the zoning map of the Orem City Code by changing the zone at approximately 1000 South, 400 West from the R8 to the PD 48 zone.
Can we have a motion?
Second.
Is there a second?
I was going to second, and, okay.
Okay, Mr. Cochran seconds.
Can I make a comment there?
Yes.
So I appreciate the sentiment and knowing the direction you're going, but again, staff's recommendation is if you're thinking making a positive recommendation, because if you vote to make a positive recommendation, it goes immediately to the city council. It won't come back to you.
With all issues that need to be dealt with.
And so the idea was that we were suggesting that if you want to make a positive recommendation, that you
continue.
Actually make a motion to continue it, so make it sort of contingent upon them getting all of these documents with UVU signed.
Yeah, I think we were a little confused on that, weren't we?
So then, when we say continuance, do we have to read all the stuff too?
No. All you'd have to say is you move to continue it until the next planning commission meeting.
We need to vote on a negative recommendation, and if that goes down, then we continue.
Yeah.
If that fails, then we continue.
But at this point, we have a motion and a second, so you either probably need to withdraw the motion or
just asking. You want to
vote
withdraw it and do the continuance? You guys have got me totally confused.
I would like to do that, but it's up to
To continue.
I like the continuance so we get some more answers.
Do I withdraw that on my own, or do I need to ask the chairman?
No, you can withdraw that on your own.
I withdraw my motion. How about your second?
I withdraw my second.
The first.
I have, well, I've been here the youngest. Yes, a continuance would be so that we have additional information.
But how many of us want that is her question.
Well, we've got to
Or
vote.
find out.
That's what he's telling us. We got to vote it. So we issue it as a continuance and vote it up or down.
Yeah, you could just make a motion to continue this to the next planning commission meeting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
We can voice our negative.
We can deny it.
Yeah.
By voting against the continuance.
Yes. That's.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue this item, item 4.5, excuse me, till the June 21st Planning Commission meeting.
I second that motion of continuance.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think we better raise our hands.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Okay.
No, where does that leave us?
So now we got to vote on it.
We're forward. So
No, I think then we have to make a recommendation to the city council because the motion to continue failed, correct?
That would seem to be the logical next move, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
One of you guys can make that motion.
Okay. Anyone want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I'll do that. I make a motion that we send a negative recommendation to the City Council for amending Article 22-11 of the Orem City Code by enacting Section 221161, the PD8 zone, amending the appendix of the Orem City Code by enacting the PD48 zone, thank you, amending the appendix of the Orem City Code by enacting Appendix UU and amending Section 2253A, and the zoning map of the Orem City Code by changing the zone generally at 1,000 South, 400 East from R8 to the PD4.
Or
west.
Fourth.
There's discrepancies
It says
on
east
there.
on mine.
Yeah, there's discrepancies.
Okay, 1,000 South, 400 West from R8 to PD48.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Ms. Jeffries seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Thank you all for being here and expressing your feelings. Let's, no, we still got more. We've got the minutes from the May 17th, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any comments or changes, modifications to those minutes?
I thought they were great.
Okay.
Motion?
We'll have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from the Planning Commission for May 17th.
Could we hold it down, please?
Take it outside.
Yeah, if you could take your conversations outside so we can finish here, we'd appreciate it. Okay, I'm sorry.
Do you want me to do it?
You made a motion.
Yeah, that we accept the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting for May 17th.
Ms. Jeffries makes a motion. I'll second that. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Kelly, are you the director today? Do you think you want to say?
Yes, can we go home?
Yeah. Do you make a motion to adjourn?
I've got a,
Oh.
this is my last planning commission.
Oh.
What?
I offered a job last night to be the planning director for Saratoga Springs.
Oh, wow.
In 2 weeks, I'll be working there.
What a great.
Congratulations.
Are you moving or driving from
No.
Spanish Fork to Saratoga?
It's 25 miles or so. It's not bad. So.
Is that
Wow.
A little more of a commute.
What's that?
you can go across Pioneer Crossing?
Yes, yeah.
Are you voting for a bridge?
What's that?
You voting for the bridge?
So offered that last night, accepted today. And so
Hey, that's great.
I'll probably pop my head in on your pre-meeting in 2 weeks, but I won't come to planning commission in 2 weeks. And I start that.
We will miss
session,
you.
So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a great association. We appreciate all you've done.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion. I can't even talk anymore. A motion.
I'll read your mind. I move that we adjourn.
We have a motion and a second from Dave Moulton. Those in favor?
Aye.
I'm not even going to ask for opposed.
It's unanimous.
Okay.
Well, it was confusing. I was conflicted, so I don't know that there was.